Chapter 214. After Yu Qing was sent off, Mu Hongyu also went down the stage happily. She walked to Chu Luiyue and winked at her. Luyu is indeed reliable. Not only did she speak up for me, but she even humiliated the people from Tai Yen Academy. Chu Luiyue pinched the golden mane bear cub's ears. Rest well. You still have to compete later. Yes, I know. Mu Hongyu responded. Then she purposely sighed. Tsong, you can't do this in the future. If not, people will say that I'm ruthless. Do you know that? The surrounding people immediately started clamoring. That's right. Hongyu, you have to look after this little thing when you compete later. I was actually quite envious of you for hunting such a golden mane bear cub. Now, you just won a competition, but you were even scolded by others. I'm not envious at all. Mu Hongyu made a funny face. You'll be so envious. If you're so capable, go find a 4th grade fiend. The crowd roared with laughter. Xuanhuan's face was green as he harshly waved his sleeves and sat down. Situ Xingqian then realized that she seemed to have brought quite a lot of trouble to her mentor. She could not help but bite her lips and softly said apologetically, I'm sorry. I was too impulsive. Xuanhuan took a deep breath and furrowed his brows. Xingqian, what's wrong with you? Since yesterday until now, he had been absent-minded. You've always been smart, so why did you do something so stupid? I know that you're close to Yu Qing, but since she lost. Why did you have to argue so much for her? Situ Xingqian guiltily looked down and did not know what to say. Actually, she just couldn't stand Tianlu Academy. No, she couldn't stand Mu Hongyu. Situ Xingqian's heart felt like it was being squeezed and she felt terrible. Actually, she knew that she was not speaking up for Yu Qing. In the past 2 days, she had seen clearly that Mu Hongyu and Chu Luiyue were on very good terms. Therefore, when she saw Mu Hongyu being so ostentatious, she felt very uncomfortable. That arrogant look was so similar to Chu Luiyue. If Mu Hongyu was proud, wouldn't Chu Luiyue be happy as well? However, such a secret thought could not be said out loud. Seeing that Situ Xingqian couldn't come up with a reason and was extremely apologetic, Xuanhuan couldn't bear to continue criticizing her. Forget it. You should calm down first. Why don't you stop coming for the next 2 days? Master, said Situ Xingqian immediately. I want to stay here. You just need to participate in the celestial physician competition on the last day. The previous competitions have nothing to do with you. You're just wasting your time here. Why are you? I just want to see how strong they are. Master, didn't you always say that you can only win 100 battles if you know yourself and your enemy? Even though I'm a celestial physician, my future opponents might not only be celestial physicians. Why didn't I notice it in the past? He slowed down his tone. She is indeed very outstanding. Once he finished speaking, there was dead silence. What does the crown prince mean? He's actually praising Chu Luiyue? Did the sun rise from the west? How could he say something like that with his own mouth? Everyone was stunned and did not know how to react. Chu Luiyue, who was regulating her breathing, knitted her brows and suddenly opened her eyes. Xiyang, where can I get my ears picked in the imperial city? Why are you asking this? Asked Xiyang slowly. Chu Luiyue was expressionless. My ears were dirty just now. Digression. Sleeping early and waking up early is good for your health. Mobile users, please browse and read. You can read more from Love Network. Chapter 215. Chu Luiyue did not lower her voice when she said this. Not only did Xiyang hear it, but Rong Jin and the rest also heard it clearly. Everyone instantly held their breaths. Chu Luiyue is really bold as usual. She even dares to say such things in front of the crown prince. However, to her surprise, Rong Jin only knitted his brows when he heard this, and he didn't flare up. He looked at Chu Luiyue deeply and turned his head away. Everyone was confused. The crown prince did not intend to find trouble with Chu Luiyue? Her words were so harsh, but the crown prince could tolerate it? Rong Jin could really tolerate it. Since he had already made up his mind to win back Chu Luiyue, this small matter was naturally nothing. Speaking of which, Chu Luiyue had suffered a lot when she was with him in the past. It was normal for her to have some resentment toward him. Didn't this mean that she still cared about him? Thinking of this, Rong Jin did not feel angry at all. Instead, he felt a faint sense of anticipation. He knew that Chu Luiyue had liked him for many years. Back then, he was bewitched by Chu Xianmin and broke off the engagement with her. However, how could his years of love disappear just like that? As long as he lowered his status, Chu Luiyue would definitely come back to him. Now that his father was very dissatisfied with him, he believed that his father would change his opinion if he could win back Chu Luiyue. Although he regretted breaking off the engagement with Chu Luiyue previously, He did not think much of it because of his status and face. However, Chu Luiyue was now very famous and had become a genius that everyone envied. Even if he reconciled with her, it would not be considered degrading his status. The plan now was to find an opportunity to explain his feelings to Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue naturally did not know that Rong Jin had thought so much in such a short time. She just felt disgusted by Rong Jin. This man was ruthless and selfish. At that time he felt that the original host was a waste and tarnished his noble status as the crown prince, so he broke off the engagement with her. Later on, Chu Xianmin was disfigured and no longer had any use for him. Thus he abandoned her like an old shoe. Being looked at by such a person, she felt her stomach churn. "Hey, Luyu, why do I feel like there's something wrong with the crown prince's attitude toward you?" asked Xiyang softly as he looked at Rong Jin and Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue glanced at him indifferently. Xiyang obediently drew a line across his lips and shut his mouth. Si Ting, who had been memorizing the Xian formation with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and glanced at Rong Jin. Then he looked down and hid the emotions in his eyes. Actually, he had already stopped reciting, and he could clearly hear the words around him. Rong Jin is narrow-minded and he's acting so abnormally now. He must have some ulterior motives toward Chu Luiyue. He originally wanted to remind Chu Luiyue to be careful of Rong Jin, but he didn't say it in the end. She's so smart, so she should be able to handle it. I shouldn't think so much. Si Ting took a deep breath and closed his eyes, trying to get rid of the messy thoughts in his mind. As time passed, the competition became more and more intense. Before the 3 academies, the number of names in the warriors box gradually decreased. In the afternoon, Chu Luiyue was picked by a girl from Nanfeng Academy. However, that girl was a stage 3 warrior. Perhaps she knew that she was not Chu Luiyue's match, so she chose to give up. She was the first person to give up since the start of the Qingjiao competition. Before this, nobody would have thought that a stage 3 warrior would give up when she picked a stage 1 warrior. However, this person was Chu Luiyue, so it made sense. She had already defeated 2 stage 4 warriors consecutively, and that was enough to prove her abilities. A stage 3 warrior was really nothing in front of Chu Luiyue. From a certain point of view, giving up was a good choice. After all, Chu Luiyue's attacks were decisive, and her moves were ruthless. What if she accidentally fainted like Lei Mingwei was? Even though the people from Nanfeng Academy felt uncomfortable, they didn't say anything. This was because they knew very well that they might not have the courage to fight with Chu Luiyue if they were in her shoes. Hence, Chu Luiyue advanced to the next round. When the second day of the competition ended, there were only 10 people left in the Qingjiao competition. Sun Zhongyan took out the last few balls of paper from the 3 boxes and read out the names of the 10 people. Among them there were 3 from Tianlu Academy, 3 from Taiyan Academy, and 4 from Nanfeng Academy. Chu Luiyue was among them. She was also the only freshman among the 10 people. When they heard Chu Luiyue's name, the square was in an uproar. The crowd was shocked, but they also felt that it was reasonable. Even though Chu Luiyue had only competed twice, she was very capable. Nobody doubted her abilities. She indeed had the right to be in the top 10. Sun Zhongyan looked around. Tomorrow's competition will be the final battle between the 10 of them. The top warrior of this year's Qingjiao competition will also be born from these 10 people. When you go back today, please recharge your energy and do your best to come out on top tomorrow. The crowd responded in unison as if they could already imagine how intense tomorrow's competition would be. They couldn't help but feel excited. Chu Luiyue stood up with the crowd and planned to return to the academy. However, she was blocked by someone after taking a few steps. It was Rong Jin. When the surrounding people saw this, they sensibly avoided them. However, their eyes kept looking in their direction, afraid that they would miss something. Chu Xianmin, who was walking in the crowd, also saw this scene. Her heart was in her mouth and she couldn't help but take 2 steps forward, wanting to hear what they were talking about. Rong Jin looked at Chu Luiyue, and his voice was unprecedentedly gentle. "Luiyue, I want to have a few words with you." Chu Luiyue looked nonchalant. "Your Highness, there shouldn't be anything to talk about with me, right?" Rong Jin didn't care about her attitude and just took it that she was throwing a tantrum. He smiled and said, "It won't take up too much of your time." Chu Luiyue looked up lazily. "Your Highness, my time is precious and I don't want to waste it on you." Her words were a little harsh. Rong Jin was a little embarrassed. Chu Luiyue then raised her feet and walked around him to leave. Rong Jin hurriedly stood in front of her again and didn't care about anything else. "Since that's the case, I'll be direct. After the Qingjiao competition, the osmanthus flowers in Golden Osmanthus Garden have bloomed. Are you here to admire the flowers?" Golden Osmanthus Garden was a garden under Rong Jin's name. It was given to him by Emperor Jianghu on his 16th birthday. Countless osmanthus trees were planted in the garden. Every year during this season the osmanthus flowers would bloom, and their fragrance would fill the entire garden. It was also a famous scenic spot in the imperial city. Chu Luiyue slowly raised his brows. Golden osmanthus garden? Isn't that the place where the original me went to the crown prince's birthday banquet but was mocked for her shabby clothes and chased out? What is Rongjin thinking? How can he have the cheek to invite me to a place that humiliates me? No, Chu Luiyue rejected him directly. Why? Rongjin was confused. Didn't you like it there in the past? You said that the osmanthus flowers are fragrant, and it's the best place to admire the moon. It's hard for your highness to remember this. But do you still remember what you said back then? Rongjin's voice suddenly stopped, and his expression turned ugly. You said that golden osmanthus garden means precious. A poor beggar like me doesn't have the right to enter. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up into a smile, but there was no happiness in her eyes. Of course Rongjin remembered. At that time he only felt that Chu Luiyue was lowly. Not to mention stepping into golden osmanthus garden, he felt terrible even if he had to look at it. After that, he never invited Chu Luiyue again. That's all in the past. There's no point in talking about it now. Liu, things are different now. I sincerely invite you. Chu Luiyue enunciated every word clearly. Your Highness, I really don't want to go. How many times do I have to say, no, before you understand? Rongjin was embarrassed as if he had been slapped in front of everyone. Your Highness and I have already broken off our engagement. From now on we have nothing to do with each other. Not in the past, not now, and definitely not in the future. So, you should find someone else for this kind of thing in the future. Chu Luiyue's gaze lightly swept across Chu Xianmin, who was not far away. After all, there are still many people waiting for you to dote on them. Then Chu Luiyue did not look at Rongjin's expression and walked forward. This time Rongjin did not stop him. Saying this in front of so many people was already his limit. Now that Chu Luiyue had mercilessly rejected him, it made him even more embarrassed. Chu Xianmin bit her lips tightly and suppressed the jealousy and resentment in her heart with much difficulty. She walked forward and softly persuaded him. Your Highness, let's go back first. Rongjin glanced at her and saw the veil on her face. He was disgusted. If it weren't for Chu Xianmin's instigation, he and Chu Luiyue would not have ended up like this. He suddenly waved his sleeves and flung Chu Xianmin's hand away. He turned around and strode away without any words of consolation. Chu Xianmin staggered and fell to the ground. Ouch! A sharp pain came from her arm, causing her to unknowingly cry out in pain. When she competed today, she was unlucky and met a stage 4 warrior. Not only did she lose, but she was also injured. When she fell, she happened to graze her wound. The surrounding people looked at her coldly with different expressions. If it were in the past, many people would have immediately stepped forward to help Chu Xianmin when they saw her like this. But now, her looks were disfigured, and she was married to the crown prince as an unfavored concubine. Her parents were even more troublesome. Who would risk offending Chu Luiyue and the crown prince to help Chu Xianmin? Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 216. News of the crown prince's invitation to Chu Luiyue being rejected spread like wildfire. Everyone had different reactions and they had different opinions. However, Chu Luiyue's attitude clearly showed that she did not want to give the crown prince face. That's right. She already dared to offend the Chu family and the crown prince when she had nothing. The current Chu Luiyue was no longer the useless person she used to be. Rongjin returned to his residence with a gloomy mood. Xuanhuan served him carefully at the side. Your Highness, I've already sent people to block the news of today's incident. The people in the imperial city? Block what? Let them spread the news. The wider the news, the better. Rongjin suppressed his anger and coldly glanced at Xuanhuan. Xuanhuan was dazed. Your Highness, what do you mean? It's best if all the aristocratic families in the imperial city know about this. Rongjin's voice was cold. Xuanhuan was his confidant, so he quickly guessed his thoughts. You're saying that other people won't have any thoughts about Miss Chu Luiyue if they know that you're interested in her? Rongjin did not say anything, but his expression showed that he agreed. Even though he was not in a good situation now, he was still the crown prince. The people in the imperial city had to take him into consideration. If news of today's incident spread, everyone would know that he was determined to get Chu Luiyue. Then those who knew what was good for them would naturally avoid her. Even though Chu Luiyue and Chu Jianghu were admitted to Tianlu Academy, not many people came to propose marriage because they had offended the Chu family and Rongjin. they were all rejected by Chu Ning. After the Qingjiao competition, many people would have thoughts about her. However, as long as Rong Jin made the first move, no one would dare to snatch her from him. Even though Chu Luiyue was still unhappy with him, she would definitely return to him after some time. He had plenty of patience. Thinking of this, his expression finally looked better. Song Yuan's eyes turned and he carefully asked, "Your Highness, I'm afraid that person will be unhappy." That person was naturally Chu Xianmin. Chu Xianmin and Chu Luiyue had already shed all pretense of cordiality. If the crown prince planned to marry Chu Luiyue, Chu Xianmin would definitely find it hard to accept. At that time, who knew what kind of trouble they would cause? Rong Jin rubbed his glabella, and disgust flashed across his eyes. Who does she think she is? Does this consort have to look at her face when doing anything? If she dared to cause trouble, she would be punished according to the rules of the crown prince residence. Song Yuan's heart skipped a beat, and he hurriedly agreed. Yes. Rong Jin then gave some instructions and Song Yuan agreed to them one by one before coming out. Walking into the courtyard, Song Yuan Kai finally breathed a sigh of relief and secretly shook his head. Previously they thought that Chu Xianmin was finally favored, but they did not expect her to fall out of favor before she could do anything. Obviously, the crown prince had no interest in her. It seemed that there was no need to treat him well in the future. Chu Liu and no one knew what the crown prince was thinking. Why did he want to chase her back? It also seemed like he had to do it. However, recalling the things that Chu Luiyue had done during this period of time, Song Yuan could not help but feel worried. She could even turn against the Chu family that had once raised her, let alone the crown prince. Now, His Majesty was very unhappy with the crown prince. Not only did he take back the power that he had previously given the crown prince, but he also placed him under house arrest for a long time. Now that the crown prince had finally gotten rid of his punishment, he wanted to do this again. No one knew how His Majesty would react. Chu Luiyue did not take Rong Jin to heart at all. She only felt that he was sick in the head regarding his various actions today. After returning to the academy, she simply tidied up and went to the second floor to cultivate. She sat cross-legged, held her breath, and focused as she quickly absorbed the surrounding heaven and earth force. Time passed bit by bit. The force gathered in Chu Liuyue's body became more and more abundant. In her dantian, the water droplet that had been quietly floating all this while started to move. Chu Luiyue was elated. Previously, she had already felt that she was about to break through to become a stage 2 warrior, but the water droplet refused to carve the second line. She focused her mind, gathered the force in her body into one, and rushed toward the water droplet. A shallow ripple finally appeared on the calm and smooth surface of the water. Chu Luiyue was very nervous as she controlled her force to rush toward it again. Ripples gradually appeared on the water droplet. Even the first line that was carved on it seemed to have a slight ripple. Chu Luiyue waited nervously. If she could break through, her pressure for tomorrow's competition would be greatly reduced. The most important thing was that she felt that a stage 1 warrior's level was too low. She stared at the water droplet closely. However, after a while, the ripples on it gradually calmed down. Chu Luiyue was dazed on the spot. She took a closer look and indeed saw that the water droplet was as smooth as before. It was very clear that there was still only one line. She did not break through to become a stage 2 warrior. Chu Luiyue stared in disbelief. She had never thought that after living for 2 lifetimes she would be stuck at this level. Even breaking through to become a stage 2 warrior was so difficult. It was not an exaggeration to say that the heaven and earth force that she had absorbed during this period was enough for an ordinary cultivator to break through to become a stage 4 warrior. Otherwise, she would not have won those 2 competitions. However, this level of cultivation was still unwilling to be raised. She let out a sigh and weakly lay on the bed. The cultivation speed of the Daijingyuan meridian was very fast. She originally thought that she could quickly increase her strength and return to the Tianling dynasty to take revenge. However, according to her current cultivation speed, she did not know how long she would have to wait for that day. Tell me what's wrong with you. Other people cultivate very fast, but it's so slow for me. Chu Liuyue muttered to herself. The water droplet in her dantian was calm like a bottomless pit, silently swallowing the rest of the force. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 217. On the 3rd day of the Qingjiao competition. The sky was clear and the breeze was warm. On this day, there were even more people in Jiangnan Square compared to the previous 2 days. After all, it was the day of the finals, so many people were interested in it. Those who could stand out in the Qingjiao competition were usually very outstanding talents. Some aristocratic families also liked to choose young men or young ladies to marry. When Chu Luiyue arrived, she felt a familiar gaze. She turned her head and saw Chu Ning in the crowd. He was sitting in the spectator seats behind Tianlu Academy. He was wearing casual clothes and clearly did not want to attract attention. When he saw Chu Luiyue looking over, he immediately waved happily. Chu Luiyue smiled and walked over. "Father, why are you here today?" "I'm here to see you." Chu Ning looked at his daughter comfortingly. He had not seen her for a few days, but he missed her. "It's a break today. I heard that you made it to the finals, so I came especially." As he watched, he asked, "They said that you defeated 2 Stage 4 warriors. Are you injured?" Chu Luiyue saw the worry in his eyes and her heart warmed. "Father, don't worry. I'm fine." "Aren't I fine? Since you're here today, just stay here and watch. I won't disappoint you." Chu Ning was happy and worried at the same time. "Just do your best. Your health is important. Do you understand? It's your first time participating in the Qingjiao competition. It's already very impressive that you made it to the top 10. You must be careful in the competition." After what happened at Wanling Mountain, his biggest wish now was for you, to be safe and healthy. Nothing else mattered. Chu Luiyue patted his arm. "You, knows what to do." Only then did Chu Ning nod. Anyway, he was here today and he would not let anyone bully you, At this point, he inadvertently looked up and saw Rong Jin. His face turned cold as he asked, Did the Crown Prince harass you yesterday?" Chu Luiyue could not help but laugh. Everyone thought that the Crown Prince had changed his mind about her. Only her own father directly said that she was harassing him. He really was her biological father. He had nothing better to do. I didn't even bother with him." That's good, that's good. Almost overnight, many people knew that Rong Jin had taken the initiative to seek peace with Chu Luiyue. When he heard this, not only was he not happy at all, he even felt disgusted for a long time. How did Rong Jin treat my daughter back then? Now he actually had the face to do so. We don't care about those things. If the Crown Prince restrains himself, then so be it. But if he dares to do this again, father will definitely not let him off. Although Chu Ning's voice was low, his expression was very serious. It was better to stay as far away from people like Rong Jin as possible. Chu Luiyue nodded. With father's words, you, is at ease. Zhong Yuanfeng, who's ranked 4th, is also a Xian master. These people have hopes of obtaining first place this year. Chu Luiyue will still be ranked 10th even if she loses to them. It's her first time participating in the Qingjiao competition. Such results are already praiseworthy. That's true. She's only 14 this year and her future is limitless. If she waits for another year or two, she might even be able to obtain first place in the Qingjiao competition. The crowd discussed fervently. Chu Luiyue's gaze swept across the few people in front of her. Finally, her gaze landed on one of them. Her lips curled up into a smile. Tianlu Academy's Chu Luiyue challenges Taiyan Academy's Situ Ziyue. Once she said that, there was dead silence. Chu Luiyue actually chose Situ Ziyue, who's ranked 1st. Is she crazy? Mobile users, please browse the internet for a better reading experience. Chapter 218. After a short silence, there was an uproar. The entire square was in an uproar. Chu Luiyue actually chose Situ Ziyue? He's an advanced stage 4 warrior. Could it be that she purposely chose the strongest one because she has no chance of winning? This way, even if she loses, she won't look bad. But if that's the case, she'll lose very badly. Did you forget that Situ Ziyue is Situ Xingqian's brother? Chu Luiyue and Situ Xingqian fell out so badly yesterday. It's hard to say if Situ Ziyue will make things difficult for her. What exactly is she thinking? I think she probably doesn't know who she is anymore after winning 2 matches. This time she'll definitely fall hard. Situ Ziyue furrowed his brows and looked at the smiling girl in front of him. Are you sure? I'm sure. Lu Yu. Sun Zhongyan could not help but say worriedly. The first round of the competition is very important. Do you really want to challenge him? Actually, from his point of view, Chu Luiyue was indeed not a match for the top 5. If she chose a relatively weaker opponent now, she might still be able to preserve her energy and get a better ranking in the second round. But now that she chose Situ Ziyue, she might not have the energy to fight again after this battle. Chu Luiyue calmly and firmly nodded. I've already chosen. Seeing how determined Chu Luiyue was, Sun Zhongyan knew that it was useless to persuade her, so he could only look at Situ Ziyue. Situ Ziyue, do you accept the challenge? Situ Ziyue smiled. Of course. Very quickly the remaining few people also chose their opponents. But at this point no one cared about that. Everyone's attention was on Chu Luiyue and Situ Ziyue's match. The others left the stage one after another and only the two of them were left. Their match was the first one. This Chu Luiyue is really arrogant. She wants to challenge Ziyue the moment she comes up. She really doesn't know her own worth. Xuanhuan did not hide his disdain and sarcasm. After these 2 days of competition, he couldn't stand Chu Luiyue. Unexpectedly, she actually took the initiative to deliver herself to him. Ziyu is about to break through to the 5th stage. Does she think that she can defeat Ziyu after defeating Lei Mingwei and Jiangyuan? How laughable. Xingqian, Ziyu has always doted on you the most. Today he will definitely avenge you. Situ Xingqian listened by the side and felt a little relieved. However, she knitted her brows slightly as if she was worried. Big brother has always been stubborn. It won't be good if he uses too much force. Chu Luiyue asked for it. She definitely knows about the relationship between you and Ziyu. She also knows about Ziyu's strength, but she still wants to challenge him. Even if she ends up half dead, she can't blame anyone. Such an arrogant person had to suffer some hardships. Situ Xingqian pursed her lips. The people behind him couldn't help but ask. Xingqian, you're too kind. He was still thinking about her at a time like this? When she said that to you yesterday, did she think about you? Exactly. People like her have to be taught a lesson. She might not appreciate your kindness. Situ Xingqian smiled warmly. I didn't think so much. I just heard that Chu Luiyue had an incomplete Yuan meridian in the past, and it wasn't easy for her to cultivate. It won't be good if Big Brother uses too much force. I'll just believe in Big Brother. In the arena, Chu Luiyue and Situ Ziyue faced each other from afar. Your courage is commendable. If you had chosen someone else, you might have gotten a better ranking. It's a pity that you chose me. This time your Qingjiao competition will end here. Situ Ziyue's tone was calm as if he was just stating a fact. In actual fact, his abilities did give him the right to say this. Chu Luiyue held the dagger in his hand. It's not too late to say these words after you win against me. Then he attacked first. He went straight for Situ Ziyue. Situ Ziyue sneered in his heart. Hearing this, Chu Luiyue actually thinks that he can win against me? There's a huge difference between an intermediate stage 4 warrior and a peak stage 4 warrior. Besides, I'm only an inch away from a stage 5 warrior now. Seeing Chu Luiyue rushing toward him, he quickly circulated his force, but he didn't dodge. In the blink of an eye, Chu Luiyue was already in front of him. He waved his arm and the dagger directly pierced Situ Ziyue's chest. The crowd was in an uproar. Chu Luiyue's gaze turned cold. There wasn't a single trace of blood on Situ Ziyue's body. This is just his afterimage. She quickly turned around. Situ Ziyue is indeed behind me. Your reaction isn't slow. It's a pity that it's useless. Situ Ziyue said calmly. The crowd then saw that the Situ Ziyue that Chu Luiyue had stabbed was gradually disappearing. I didn't expect Situ Ziyue's lightning flash footwork to reach such a level. His afterimage can almost be passed off as the real thing. I remember last year, his afterimage was just a blurry silhouette that wouldn't last long before disappearing. But now, he can actually last for such a long time. No matter how fast Chu Luiyue is compared to Situ Ziyue, he's still too far away. This is completely a one-sided suppression. I just don't know how Situ Ziyue plans to fight this match. If he's willing to end it quickly, it's fine. If he wants to teach Chu Luiyue a lesson then. Chu Luiyue's gaze turned slightly and landed on Situ Ziyue's feet. When he moved, blue lightning would faintly appear under his feet. No wonder his speed was so fast. It seemed like this method wouldn't work. Since you've already made your move, then it's my turn now. Situ Ziyue said as he folded his hands in front of him. The icy blue force gathered and finally condensed on his right index finger. At first glance, that finger seemed to be burning with a ball of blue flame. Immediately, he stretched his hand forward and lightly tapped. Boom. A huge blue flame formed a finger and pressed towards Chu Luiyue. Ice flame finger. A terrifying pressure instantly enveloped Chu Luiyue, making him unable to move. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 219. With this finger, Chu Luiyue would be severely injured even if she didn't die. Chu Luiyue stared at the blue finger that was approaching her. She was very clear that the gap between the two of them was too big. Any small tricks or schemes would be useless at this moment. Therefore she had to do her best. If she wanted to win then, she flipped her wrist and took out 2 items from her xianxia bag. At this moment, the finger was already in front of her. She was about to be completely crushed. The outside of the arena was silent. Everyone's eyes were focused on this place. Chu Ning stood up abruptly and was extremely anxious. If Situ Ziyue dared to kill you, he would stop him no matter what. Sun Zhongyan was also frowning. He planned to make a move at any time. It didn't matter if Chu Luiyue lost this round. However, if there were any serious sequelae, the loss would outweigh the gain. Moreover, if something happened to Chu Luiyue, how would he explain it to his martial uncle? Wah! The burning flame on the giant finger suddenly flew out rapidly and completely surrounded Chu Luiyue. Exclamations came from the crowd. It's over. Chu Luiyue will lose for sure. How is it just losing for sure? That ice flame finger is one of Situ Ziyue's trump cards. It's extremely powerful. I heard that there was once someone who wanted to assassinate him but was killed by Situ Ziyue in the end. I'm afraid Chu Luiyue won't be able to withstand this flame. If she admits defeat now, she might suffer less. God. What is Situ Ziyue trying to do? In the arena, Situ Ziyue was crazily pouring his force into the ice flame finger. Boom. A loud sound was heard. The flames, which were already surging fiercely, suddenly surged up. Chu Luiyue's figure completely disappeared. Under the ice flame finger, a clear indentation had already appeared on the white jade floor. The ground around the flame that surrounded Chu Luiyue was directly charred black. Was he trying to kill Chu Luiyue? Sun Zhongyan suddenly stood up. Situ Ziyu? Are you trying to kill me on the spot? Before Situ Ziyu could say anything, Xuanhuan had already spoken. Brother Xuanhuan, why are you in such a hurry? Chu Luiyue had the wooden token of the Qingjiao competition on him. If something really happened, the wooden token would automatically crack open as a warning. But now, wasn't he still fine? Why are you so worried? Sun Zhongyan was so angry that his face turned pale. Of course he knew that Chu Luiyue was still alive. But if he waited until the wooden tablet cracked, it would be too late. That girl was his martial uncle's only disciple after so many years. She was also a genius that he thought highly of. If she died just like that, he would definitely not let the matter rest. Xuanhuan, you have to think carefully. If something happens to her, you won't be able to afford it. Xuanhuan did not think so. Instead, he laughed and said, didn't Brother Zhongyan say yesterday that the children had a sense of propriety? I watched Ziyue grow up. He has always been steady and would never do anything overboard. Sun Zhongyan knew that Xuanhuan was just being unreasonable. He could not be bothered with him and decided to charge forward. Xuanhuan also stood up with a cold expression on his face. Brother Zhongyan, are you going to break the rules first? Sun Zhongyan did not say anything and was about to make a move. Chu Luiyue was enveloped in that ball of fire, and there was no movement at all. He was afraid that something bad was going to happen. On the other side, Chu Ning had already jumped down from her seat and rushed toward the arena. However, at that moment, the situation on the arena suddenly changed. With Chu Luiyue as the center, several silver streams of light suddenly appeared. Buzz. A strange buzzing sound could be heard. It instantly spread throughout the entire Jiangnan square. Sun Zhongyan suddenly looked up, and Chu Ning immediately stopped as well. The silver streams of light were still increasing. Moreover, they were intertwining. Situ Ziyu gradually frowned, and a trace of uneasiness appeared in his heart. For some reason he seemed to have sensed a dangerous aura. Buzz. The buzzing sound became clearer and clearer. The intertwining streams of light finally formed. Fu Yunshan stood up in shock. A fourth-level Xian formation? This kind of pressure, this kind of aura, and that complicated pattern? As a Xian master, Sun Zhongyan had already realized something the moment the streams of light appeared. At that moment, when he saw the gigantic Xian formation on the arena, his heart raced. That was indeed a fourth-level Xian formation. A clear female voice suddenly rang out. Buddha Lotus Formation. The streams of light intertwined on the Xian formation, and it looked like a lotus flower that was blooming beautifully. Boom, boom, boom. A terrifying aura spread out from the Xian formation. At the same time, the ice fire finger that was approaching Chu Luiyue suddenly shattered. The flames that had originally enveloped her fell like sparks and scattered in all directions. A slender and straight figure appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Gasps could be heard from the crowd. Chu Luiyue was actually not dead. In fact, her body was unharmed, and there were no injuries at all. She was holding a palm-sized black crystal in her hand. Countless streams of light were flowing out from that crystal. It's the Black Crystal Xian Formation. Someone cried out in surprise. After a momentary daze, almost everyone's face was filled with shock. It was normal for a Xian master to be able to activate a Black Crystal Xian Formation, but Chu Luiyue was clearly a Stage 2 Xian master. How could she activate a fourth-level Black Crystal Xian Formation? Situ Xingqian, on the other hand, lost her composure and widened her eyes as she stared at Chu Liyue's other hand. A small crystal ball was faintly discernible. That's crystal barrier. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. This was the only way to explain why Chu Liyue's cultivation speed was so fast after recovering her Yuan Meridian and stepping into the path of cultivation. Otherwise, how could she rely on her rank as a Stage 1 warrior to win consecutively? Just as his heart was in a mess because of this, there was a sudden fluctuation in the arena. Chu Liyue had broken through. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 222. Crimson red force surged out from Chu Liyue's body and enveloped her like a blazing flame. The aura on her body had already risen to its peak. Chu Liyue only saw that there seemed to be an invisible hand on the water droplet that steadily drew a second line. Bang! In her mind there was a soft and clear sound. Her internal and external injuries quickly healed and the force in her dantian was even more abundant than before. In the next moment she suddenly opened her eyes. A faint red glow flashed across her clear and sharp eyes. Rank 2 warrior. She looked at her palm and felt the surging force in her body. She couldn't help but smile. She finally broke through. After such a long wait, her previous efforts were not in vain. Although she didn't know why she suddenly broke through today, but at this very moment, it was indeed a good thing for her. Seeing Chu Liyue break through, the originally quiet plaza became restless again. Chu Liyue raised her hand and kept the crystal barrier. She raised her eyebrows and looked at Situ Ziyue, who was standing opposite her, and smiled. Sorry to keep you waiting. Situ Ziyue quietly sized up Chu Liyue and unconsciously frowned. Chu Liyue's breakthrough this time actually didn't take too much time. It only took about the time for an incense stick to burn. But after breaking through, she was obviously different from before. The most obvious thing was that the aura on her body was much stronger than before. In addition, the injuries on her body seemed to have mostly healed because of the breakthrough just now. She had only broken through from a rank 1 warrior to a rank 2 warrior. How did Chu Liyue's body undergo such a huge change? He raised the Ling Xiao saber in his hand and the icy blue force quickly enveloped it. The strange pattern on it was faintly discernible. This time, you shouldn't have any other reason to delay the match, right? It's time to end it. Chu Liyue chuckled. What a coincidence, I think so too. As she spoke, she picked up the black crystal Shen formation again. With a thought, force gushed out. Buzz buzz. The black crystal Shen formation shone brightly. Soon streaks of light flew out again. It quickly formed a huge Shen formation under Chu Liyue's feet. The originally dimmed Buddhist lotus slowly bloomed once more. Situ Ziyue sneered. Do you think you can win by using the same trick twice? The Ling Xiao saber in his hand suddenly slashed down. Falling clouds of flowers. Following this shout, the pattern on the blade suddenly moved. Then a small cloud creeper flower suddenly bloomed. The trumpet flower slowly moved along the groove on the blade. With every inch he moved, the trumpet flowers grew a little bigger. When it slid to the tip of the blade, the trumpet flower was almost as big as a lantern. Go! Situ Ziyu shouted in a low voice. The trumpet flower flew up gracefully, falling towards Chu Liyue. Compared to the Buddhist lotus blooming under Chu Liyue's feet, the trumpet flower was much smaller. It was not even as big as one of the petals. However, no one dared to underestimate this cloud creeper flower. It slowly flew forward, and cracks gradually appeared on the ground that it passed by. One could see how strong its suppression was. Chu Liyue looked up and glanced at it. Even though there was still a distance between them, she could clearly feel the terrifying power contained in it. The indescribable suppression made her body tense up, and she found it hard to breathe. Falling clouds of flowers? Isn't that one of the 3 ultimate moves of the Ling Xiao saber? Situ Ziyue can actually use it now. It seems like he's really going to break through and become a stage 5 warrior. The force in his body is actually so abundant. He seems to be only 21 years old this year. Speaking of which, he's even younger than Rong Jin, but he's only one step away from becoming a stage 5 warrior. If he breaks through, he'll probably become the youngest stage 5 warrior. Seeing the trumpet flower in the air, the crowd couldn't hide their shock as they discussed fervently. Rong Jin, who had been watching this competition from the side, had a cold expression when he heard this. He was the most famous genius in country Yaoqin, but he was indeed lacking compared to Situ Ziyue. In the past few years the two of them had fought a few times, but Rong Jin lost more than he won. This was especially so in the Qingjiao competition last year, where he lost completely. He originally thought that after a year of cultivation he could catch up to Situ Ziyue and even surpass him. However, looking at the current situation, the gap between the two of them had become even bigger. Not mentioning other things, just the Buddha lotus formation that Chu Luiyue used just now already required a lot of effort for him to deal with it. Thinking of this, he felt even more aggrieved. His jaw tightened and the surrounding aura was as cold as ice. The trumpet flower was getting closer and closer. However, if the surrounding people took a closer look, they would notice that Chu Luiyue wasn't panicking at all. She retracted her gaze and quietly looked at the black Shen formation in her hands. Success or failure depends on this, muttered Chu Luiyue softly. Then, she injected all the force in her body into it without holding back. Honk. A sound suddenly came from the black Shen formation. Situ Ziyue chuckled. You're about to die, yet you still don't regret. Suddenly, the mocking smile at the corner of his mouth froze. His eyes were filled with shock. He saw that under Chu Luiyue's feet, under the Buddha lotus that was slowly blooming, countless rays of light were gathering. In just an instant, even more petals had formed. Chu Luiyue had actually activated the second layer of the Buddha lotus on the black Shen formation. In other words, she had used her own strength to activate the full power of this level 4 Shen formation. Looking at the Buddha lotus that was passionately blooming with layers of petals, Situ Ziyue's heart suddenly felt uneasy. It wasn't that he didn't know the power of a level 4 Shen formation. At this moment, the trumpet flower had already flown in front of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue suddenly waved her hand in front of her. That Buddhist lotus also suddenly moved forward according to her will. Its speed wasn't fast, but the distance between the trumpet flower and Chu Luiyue was already not far. Therefore, it didn't take much time for the Buddha lotus and the trumpet flower to confront each other. Buzz. The petals of the Buddha lotus swayed gently. The trumpet flower's flying speed suddenly decreased by a lot. Buzz. The layers of petals swayed with the wind. The trumpet flower had completely stopped. It was hanging right above the Buddha lotus. Chu Luiyue's clear voice instantly rang out, "Close." As her voice fell, the petals of the Buddha lotus started to close gradually. The trumpet flower seemed to have lost control and fell down. The layers of petals instantly closed up and completely covered it. Situ Ziyue's face suddenly paled a little. After some time, the Buddha lotus bloomed again. Its petals were already damaged by a lot. It was obvious that it had used up a lot of energy in the fight just now. However, the Buddha lotus that was originally aggressive now looked like it had been defeated. It fell to the ground dispiritedly without any signs of life. Situ Ziyue suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Situ Xianxia glanced at him hesitantly before she finally lifted her skirt and prepared to go on stage. No. Situ Ziyue shook his head, his brows tightly knitted together. If he were to step down now, wouldn't he lose completely? Bring him down. Xuanhuan's voice became much harsher. Situ Xianxia paused in her steps, but she still stepped forward in the end. Everyone fell silent for a moment. This meant that Situ Ziyue had lost. Brother, let's go down. Situ Xianxia held his arm and said with heartache. Situ Ziyue was furious as he angrily waved his arm, wanting to fling her away. However, his actions were weak, and he couldn't even break free from Situ Xianxia's grip. Situ Xianxia bit her lower lip and finally understood why her mentor directly asked her to help her brother down. He's actually so severely injured. Situ Xianxia helped Situ Ziyue up without any explanation. Brother, let's talk when we get back. Situ Ziyue didn't want to leave with his tail between his legs. That would be a huge humiliation. However, he knew his own body's condition very well. Even if he continued to stay, he wouldn't have any chances of winning. He stared deeply at Chu Luiyue, his eyes filled with anger and hatred. Chu Luiyue ignored him and continued to wave with a smile. Take care. Situ Ziyue spat out another mouthful of blood. Situ Xianxia's heart tightened, and she finally couldn't help but turn around and stare at Chu Luiyue. She enunciated each word clearly and said, Mentor once told me not to be depressed when I lose and not to be arrogant when I win. If not, I don't know when I'll suffer a huge setback. When that time comes, it'll definitely be very painful. Chu Luiyue blinked. Director Xuanhuan is indeed a person of virtue and prestige, and his words are very logical. However, her gaze turned and landed on Situ Ziyue as she regretfully said, Unfortunately, it's a pity. Your brother doesn't seem to have heard of this before. Look, he suffered a huge setback in front of me, didn't he? Situ Xianxia was stumped. I've never seen such a shameless person who inverts right and wrong. Situ Ziyu was about to faint from anger. He raised his arm as if he wanted to do something, but it drooped down weakly in the end. I hope you'll always be so smug. Situ Xingqian stared deeply at Chu Luiyue and didn't say anything else as she turned around and left with Situ Ziyu. Chu Luiyue watched the two of them leave and her lips curled up. Thank you for your blessings. I'll definitely work hard. Situ Xingqian's heart was in turmoil. How did that person interact with such a woman? Scheming, cunning, scheming. What exactly is he thinking? Could it be, just because of that face? Situ Xingqian's heart was filled with thoughts. Even after she brought Situ Ziyu away, her heart still couldn't calm down. However, Chu Luiyue didn't even care about them. She only cared about one thing now. Elder son, according to the rules, I'm now in the second round, right? Sun Zhongyan's heart couldn't be described with the word, shocked. Chu Luiyue's series of performances had already made him extremely proud and elated. When he thought of that possibility again, he really couldn't like Chu Luiyue anymore. Of course. He looked around and said confidently, Tian Zhongyan, this is the first round. For this round, Tianlu Academy's Chu Luiyue wins. Qin Jiao competition's preliminary ranking. Chu Luiyue succeeded in his challenge and is ranked first. His low and deep voice instantly reverberated throughout the entire square. Mobile users, please browse the internet for a better reading experience. Chapter 224. Chu Luiyue actually succeeded in her challenge. Sun Zhongyan's voice was like a clap of thunder that instantly woke everyone up from their shock. That's right. She had challenged Situ Ziyu, who was ranked first. Now that Situ Ziyu had admitted defeat, she naturally became first. Even though they had seen the competition with their own eyes, this fact was still unbelievable. Not only had Chu Luiyue won, but she had also broken through in the process. This sounded like a fairy tale, but it had actually happened before their eyes. They had no choice but to believe it. Even the Tianlu Academy crowd was dumbfounded and could not recover from their shock for a long time. Chu Luiyue's lips curled up slightly before she left the stage. However, she did not return to her seat directly. Instead, she walked toward Chu Ning. Father. When Chu Ning saw her coming down, she quickly walked up to her and grabbed her arm. She looked her up and down and asked nervously, are you okay? The competition had been so intense just now, and he had watched from the side with trepidation. Chu Luiyue spread her hands and smiled until her eyes curved into crescents. You're a stage 5 warrior. Can't you tell if I'm injured? Chu Ning had personally checked her and found that other than using too much force, she did not have any serious problems. Thus he was relieved. Upon hearing this, he could not help but laugh. So what if you're a stage 5 warrior? Now you can defeat a peak stage 4 warrior. I'm afraid that before long even I won't be your opponent. He was worried, but he was also proud and happy. The competition just now could be said to have been a perilous one. He was very clear that if Yuer had not broken through at the last moment, they would have definitely lost this round. Fortunately, it was a close call in the end. Chu Luiyue winked playfully. How is that the same? Father will always be the most powerful in Yuer's heart. However, this time you can finally rest assured, right? After the Wanling Mountain incident, Chu Ning did not say anything on the surface, but she knew in her heart that he was traumatized. Even when both of them were at home, he would often call her name. If he couldn't see it for a while, he would be nervous and anxious. After experiencing the loss of his daughter, he began to worry about his gains and losses. Chu Luiyue wanted to make him feel at ease, so he didn't play any extra tricks on the field today and went all out. Now that he won against Situ Ziyu, Chu Ning was clearly much more appeased. How could Chu Ning not know what she was thinking? Emotions surged in his heart and even his eyes became a little hot. He squeezed Chu Luiyue's shoulder. His lips moved, but his throat seemed to be choked. After a while he said, is naturally the best. Chu Luiyue smiled obediently. Then I'll go back first. Maybe someone will challenge me later. You should also go back and sit down. Chu Ning agreed and urged her to get some rest. The two of them separated and returned to their respective positions. However, Chu Ning's gaze never left Chu Luiyue's body. He watched her walk back, watched the crowd from Tianlu Academy cheering enthusiastically, and watched countless people looking at her with envy and amazement. Chu Ning let out a long sigh. His eyes were slightly red, but he couldn't help but smile. His was no longer the cowardly girl who could be bullied by others. Now she was like the sun in the clouds, shining brightly. Chu Luiyue's return was once again welcomed by the people from the academy. However, she keenly sensed that the atmosphere seemed to be different from yesterday. How should she put it? Everyone seemed to have an inexplicable respect for her. Whether it was their speech, actions, or anything else, they seemed to be more reserved than before. The way they looked at her was also a little strange. Chu Luiyue touched her face. Is there something on my face? Everyone was silent for a moment. Xiang gave her a thumbs up. You have the glow of a genius. Chu Luiyue was speechless. Xiyang's glib tongue was just like a dog's mouth. Nothing good could come out of it. She looked at Mu Hongyu. What's wrong with them? She just went up to fight. Why did she feel that something was wrong when she came back? Mu Hongyu hugged the golden mane bear cub and looked at Chu Luiyue. She swallowed her saliva with difficulty. Luyu, did you deliberately hide your strength before? That was Situ Ziyue. She actually won too. She even made him vomit blood. Think about how arrogant he was before. In the blink of an eye he was completely defeated. Chu Luiyue pondered for a moment. Which time are you talking about? Mu Hongyu was speechless. How many times? She closed her eyes. Pretend I didn't ask. Her brain must have short-circuited for her to ask such a question. From the moment she entered the academy until now, which one of her achievements didn't show her extraordinary talent and strength? To think that she always felt that the gap between them wasn't that big. I must cultivate diligently in the future. Xinhu nodded vigorously. Me too. Gu Mingfeng looked up at Chu Luiyue and gave her a meaningful look. Chu Luiyue was speechless. She returned to her seat and sat down. The surroundings gradually quieted down, but the curious and amazed gazes did not decrease at all. She didn't care and planned to close her eyes and rest. However, Siting suddenly spoke up. Who gave you the crystal barrier? Chu Luiyue looked at him in confusion. Oh. Siting narrowed his eyes. The person you like. Chu Luiyue paused and nodded slightly. Yes. Siting was silent for a moment. You seem to really like him. With that he turned his head. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Why did Siting say that so strangely? Didn't she just use the crystal barrier? But seeing that he didn't seem to want to talk about it, she didn't ask any more. She took out the small silver ball and played with it in her hand. Siting sighed softly in his heart. At this moment he could finally let it go completely. He thought that it was just an excuse, but he didn't expect it to be true. Perhaps even she herself did not realize that when she mentioned that person, the corners of her mouth unconsciously curled up into a smile, just how moving it was. He didn't know who had the luck to win her heart. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 225. After Chu Luiyue won this round, the situation in the arena immediately changed. The remaining few people looked at her from time to time with different expressions, but they were obviously more serious. They thought that Chu Luiyue would be at the bottom of the last 10 people, but who knew that she would defeat Situ Ziyue and take first place? This time they had to re-evaluate Chu Luiyue. Previously, when she was a Stage 1 warrior, she defeated 2 Stage 4 warriors consecutively. After breaking through to Stage 2, she even defeated a Stage 4 warrior. This result was enough to make Chu Luiyue famous. If they wanted to take first place, they had to surpass Chu Luiyue. Sun Zhongyin looked at a young man from Nanfeng Academy. Xianxia, it's your turn to choose. Xianxia was ranked 9th in front of Chu Luiyue. According to the rules, it was his turn to choose one of the top 5 to challenge. Xianxia seemed to be prepared. He went up the stage and cupped his hands at a young man from Taiyan Academy. Nanfeng Academy's Xianxia challenges Taiyan Academy's Su Tingfeng. Seeing him make such a choice, everyone nodded subconsciously. Clearly they felt that it was within their expectations. Su Tingfeng was ranked 5th. It was obvious that he was the easiest to challenge among the top 5. Xianxia choosing him was the safest choice. Su Tingfeng laughed heartily and with a leap he jumped onto the arena. Please? Seeing the two of them fighting, some people started discussing in private. I was scared to death. I thought that all the new students this year were so powerful. It's enough to have Chu Luiyue. Otherwise we won't be able to survive. Actually, I heard that Xianxia is only 16 years old this year, but he's already a Stage 3 warrior. He should be the top among the new students. It's his first time participating in the Qingjiao competition this year, but he directly entered the top 10. He's not inferior to Jianghuan at all. It's a pity that Chu Luiyue appeared in front of him, overshadowing the others. I think that even if Chu Luiyue isn't the top warrior this year, she will still be famous. Her future is limitless. With the intense battle between Chu Luiyue and Situ Ziyue as a comparison, the battle between Su Tingfeng and Xianxia seemed much more ordinary. Although Xianxia was talented, there was a gap between him and Su Tingfeng. After a tough battle for half an hour, he lost regretfully. Su Tingfeng cupped his hands at Xianxia politely. You let me win. Xianxia chuckled bitterly. It's indeed not easy. I wonder. He couldn't help but look at Tian's side. To the end, to the stage, to the stage, to the stage. The surrounding people were still discussing her battle in low voices, but there wasn't the slightest bit of pride in her eyes, as if she wasn't the one who had won. Was to the top to the stage to the end. Xianxia was ashamed of his inferiority. Su Tingfeng followed his gaze and his expression changed slightly. He rubbed his glabella with a slight headache. Originally he thought that his ranking could be higher, but it seemed like it would be difficult. The next two matches were very fast. In the third match, Tianlu Academy's Qinhuai challenged Nanfeng Academy's Xuanhuan. In the fourth match, Nanfeng Academy's Li Ziyuan challenged Xiao Wenling from the same academy. The three people after Chu Luiyue all tried their best to challenge people with lower rankings, but they still failed. Chu Luiyue watched seriously as she adjusted her breathing. She couldn't tell who would become her opponent later on, so she had to take this chance to observe their abilities. Both Xuanhuan and Xiao Wenling were intermediate stage 4 warriors. Judging from the competition, they weren't as good as Situ Ziyue. This also meant that they couldn't threaten her for the time being. She turned her gaze and looked at Rong Jin. Rong Jin, who was in second place, became the last person to be chosen. His opponent was Taiyan Academy's Huan Jingchua. Huan Jingchua was in sixth place, and he was already an intermediate stage 4 warrior. If it were the previous Xuanhuan or Xiao Wenling, they might have a chance of winning. However, Rong Jin was a peak stage 4 warrior and he was stronger. His chances of winning weren't high. The two of them stood in the arena and faced each other. Both of them were tall and had handsome appearances. Just by standing there, they attracted the attention of many women. I didn't have the chance to fight you last year and I've always regretted it. This time it's finally perfect. Huan Jingchua chuckled. Please give me your guidance. Rong Jin nodded proudly. It's not guidance, it's just a friendly match. Although he said this, he didn't take Huan Jingchua seriously. There was a difference in abilities between the two of them. Rong Jin had seen Huan Jingchua's previous matches, and he could only be considered average. Rong Jin was aiming for first place in the warrior competition. After he defeated Huan Jingchua, he might have to challenge Chu Luiyue. Thinking of this, he felt frustrated. Let's begin. Huan Jingchua looked at Rong Jin's absent-minded appearance and smiled deeply. Please? Then he made the first move. The moment he moved, his figure disappeared from the spot. Rong Jin suddenly recovered his senses and immediately knitted his brows. How did Hang Jingchua's speed suddenly become so fast? A cold wind came from behind, and Rong Jin immediately changed his direction and threw out a palm strike. Lingyun palm. The wind from his palm whistled. Just as it was about to hit Huan Jingchua's chest, he somehow moved and dodged it again. Rong Jin's palm strike missed. Looking at the smiling Huan Jingchua in the other direction, Rong Jin's heart slowly sank. This Huan Jingchua is not right. Chu Luiyue, who was sitting below the stage and watching the match, suddenly sat up straight. His gaze focused as he stared at Huan Jingchua. Xiyang noticed her interest and couldn't help but ask softly, You also think that there's something wrong with Huan Jingchua? Even though he didn't like Rong Jin's abilities were widely acknowledged. But now Huan Jingchua easily dodged Rong Jin's attack. Chu Luiyue was silent for a moment and said, He's an advanced stage 4 warrior. Yes, everyone knows that he's... Wait, you mean Huan Jingchua? Xiyang was shocked and couldn't help but take a few more glances. That's impossible, right? His aura is clearly similar to Jianghuan's. Isn't he an intermediate stage 4 warrior? Chu Luiyue didn't explain, but her expression became more serious. Xiyang wanted to say something, but he suddenly felt Huan Jingchua's aura skyrocket. In just a moment, his aura wasn't any weaker than Rong Jin's. The two of them went from being one strong and one weak to being evenly matched. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. This Huan Jingchua will be a strong opponent for me. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. What they were most concerned about wasn't why Hang Jingchua suddenly became stronger in the past year but whether Rong Jin could win this round. He was publicly acknowledged as one of the strongest students in Tianlu Academy. They all hoped that he would be able to get first place in the Qingjiao competition. As for himself, it was clear that he had the same thoughts. But if he lost this round, he would fall to the bottom 5. Then, the best result he could achieve was only 6th place. This wasn't even as good as his 5th place last year. It was fine if other people lost, but if Rongjin lost, the entire academy would lose face. Bai Qin rolled his eyes and smiled. Elder son, actually, we don't have to worry too much. No matter what, we still have little Luyu. I'm first now. As long as I can stabilize this position in the future, it will definitely be a great honor. Sun Zhongyan wanted to say something but stopped. Actually, he was still worried. This Heng Jingchua seems to be holding back. Unlike the stifling atmosphere at Tianlu Academy, the crowd at Taiyan Academy finally regained their spirits. Xuanhuan smiled in surprise. This kid hit it well. Even I didn't know that he had already broken through to become a peak stage 4 warrior. Situ Xingqian had already calmed down, so she smiled and said, Master is always busy. It's normal that he didn't notice such small things. Even though Xuanhuan was the director, there were many things that he didn't personally ask about. Most of his energy was actually placed on Situ Xingqian. If not, he wouldn't have the idea of letting Situ Xingqian become the top celestial physician in her first Qingjiao competition. No matter what, this kid looks like he's a talent that can be nurtured. When the Qingjiao competition ends, we have to nurture him well. The few teachers behind him nodded when they heard this. You're right, director. Xuanhuan looked at the stage in satisfaction. How shrewd was his judgment. He could tell with one look that Rongjin was gradually at a disadvantage. As long as nothing happened to Heng Jingchua, it was only a matter of time before he won. Even though they lost Situ Ziyue, they still had Heng Jingchua. I really want to see if Tianlu Academy's people can still be so smug when Rongjin loses. Many wounds gradually appeared on Rongjin's body. Even though they weren't serious, the blood stains on his clothes made him look especially pathetic. However, Heng Jingchua still looked like he was at ease. The contrast between the two was really stark. The crowd's voices gradually became softer as they watched this scene nervously. Heng Jingchua suddenly closed in. Rongjin was shocked and immediately retreated. However, he was injured, so how could he be faster than Heng Jingchua? The distance between the two kept shrinking. Heng Jingchua finally struck out again. Rongjin couldn't avoid it and could only brace himself to receive it. A punch flew out. Hong. The two of them crazily attacked each other. The messy ripples spread in all directions. At this point, Rongjin suddenly felt that something was amiss. A chill was spreading from Heng Jingchua's palm to his hand. At the same time, the force in his body suddenly became messy and started to drain rapidly. His heart skipped a beat and he immediately looked up. Heng Jingchua's move was very strange. It's time to end this. Heng Jingchua met his gaze and didn't avoid it. Instead, he smiled meaningfully. His voice, which had originally sounded modest and courteous, was now filled with coldness. Not good, Rongjin thought. He immediately wanted to retreat. However, Heng Jingchua was faster. His palm turned into a claw and directly grabbed Rongjin's wrist. The strength in his hand was frightening. This time, Rongjin's wrist was instantly bruised. How dare you? Before Rongjin could finish his sentence, Heng Jingchua had already grabbed his wrist and harshly flung it out. The crowd only saw Rongjin's figure uncontrollably fly out. Then he fell to the ground with a bang. The key was that he fell outside the competition venue. Out of bounds, he was eliminated. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 227. There was an uproar. Nobody expected Rongjin to be eliminated in such a manner. At this point, Situ Ziyue and Rongjin, who had the highest hopes for this year's Qingjiao competition, had both been defeated. Rongjin finally recovered his senses when he heard the commotion around him and realized that he had been pushed out of the arena. I lost. Rongjin's mind went blank. He never thought that he would lose to Heng Jingchua. He also didn't think that he would fall behind the top 5. This failure directly determined that he had no hope of surpassing last year's ranking. He supported himself with his arms and wanted to stand up, but he realized that he had no force in his body. He looked up in shock and saw that Heng Jingchua had regained his gentle and harmless smile. Thank you for letting me win, Crown Prince Rongjin. Even though he was smiling, he stood there high and mighty. His eyes and brows were filled with mockery. It was as if he was saying, "You're just so." Rongjin's heart burned like fire, causing him to lose his rationality. Once he opened his mouth, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground again. His organs seemed to be enveloped by the cold air, which gradually spread to his entire body. His body gradually stiffened and his mind became muddled. Finally, his vision turned black and he fainted. Go and bring him back. Sun Zhongyan immediately frowned and said. Very quickly, someone went forward and helped Rongjin up. Realizing that he had fainted, Sun Zhongyan hurriedly went forward and carefully looked at his face. His brows furrowed even more tightly. Even though he expected Heng Jingchua to win, it didn't seem to be enough to make Rong Jin faint. However, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with Rong Jin. He glanced at Heng Jingchua but saw that the man had already left. His expression was the same as usual. Xianxia, come and take a look. Xianxia went forward and took Rong Jin's pulse. After checking carefully, he shook his head. He was depressed previously and he fainted because of the blow today. It's nothing serious. The crowd looked at each other and was speechless. They had actually heard a little about Rong Jin being grounded by His Majesty. He could only come out because of the Qingjiao competition. He wanted to use this to make a comeback, but he didn't expect that this series of events would break him down. Sun Zhongyan nodded, feeling slightly relieved. That's good. Bring him back first and let Zhuorong take care of him. Xianxia hesitated. If that's the case, wouldn't it be the same as giving up on the competition later on? How can he fight in his current state? Besides, what's the point of continuing the competition? Sun Zhongyan sighed. As the crown prince, Rong Jin was used to being arrogant. This time he was aiming for first place. Now, not to mention first place, he was not even fated to be in the top 5. Chapter 228. As expected, Heng Jingchua stood out and went for the first place. In an instant, almost everyone became excited. These two people were definitely the most eye-catching people in this Qingjiao competition. Chu Luiyue was young, but her fighting skills were shocking. It was easy for her to win against someone of a higher level. Heng Jingchua had improved so quickly that he was not to be underestimated. Everyone was curious about who would have the last laugh when the two of them met. Under countless gazes, Chu Luiyue stood up, smiled and nodded. Please? I didn't expect it to be the two of us fighting in the end. Heng Jingchua cupped his hands and smiled. Chu Luiyue seemed to smile. You should have expected this, right? Heng Jingchua's smile froze for a moment, but it quickly disappeared. Miss Chu, you really know how to joke. Everyone wants to win in the Qingjiao competition. However, I didn't expect to enter the finals. I also didn't expect my final opponent to be you. Chu Luiyue could not be bothered to listen to him. Heng Jingchua obviously came prepared. He purposely hid his abilities previously and only showed his true abilities when he fought with Rong Jin. She was almost certain that he had other tricks up his sleeves. Cut the crap. Let's begin, said Chu Luiyue as she took out the black Xian formation crystal. Heng Jingchua's eyelids twitched. Chu Luiyue's move was indeed difficult to deal with. Isn't it bad for little Luyu to use her killer move the moment she goes up? Asked Bai Chen worriedly. Sun Zhongyan smiled helplessly. What else can she do? Heng Jingchua is an advanced stage 4 warrior after all. The difference between the two of them was huge. If Chu Luiyue did not give it her all from the start, this match would end very quickly. By then she would not even have the chance to use her killer move. However, she used too much energy just now. She definitely hasn't recovered yet. It's already very impressive that she won against Situ Ziyue. Even if she loses this match, she'll be second. Besides, she's not a warrior in the academy. As long as she does her best, she won't have any regrets. Bai Chen thought about it and didn't say anything else. Buddhist Lotus Formation. With Chu Luiyue's clear shout, the first layer of petals slowly bloomed. Immediately after, the second level quickly appeared. The huge Buddhist lotus appeared once again. A powerful pressure silently spread out. Chu Luiyue had used the Buddhist Lotus Formation twice in a row, but he had almost exhausted all of his strength. However, the power of a level 4 Xian formation was enough to deal with someone at the peak of the 4th stage. As long as he could kill Heng Jingchua with one strike, he would be able to win. Heng Jingchua looked at the Buddhist lotus that was slowly blooming and his expression turned serious. He clasped his hands slightly in front of him, and streams of origin power rapidly condensed. This time, Heng Jingchua is definitely going to win. The difference in strength is indeed difficult to overcome. Looking at the situation, Chenghan's lips curled up. Jingchua's abilities have indeed improved a lot. He can even break through a 4th level Xian formation. Xingchen, even though your brother is injured, now that Jingchua has stepped in and won first place, it can be considered as helping Ziyue and the entire academy regain face. Situ Xingchen nodded. I wonder if Heng Jingchua can deal with Chu Luiyue like how he dealt with Rong Jin. In this competition, nobody was allowed to kill, but it was still possible to injure someone severely. Since Heng Jingchua wants to be first, he must have used all his strength against Chu Luiyue. Thinking of this, Situ Xingchen finally felt a little better. As for the crystal barrier, it won't be too late to ask about it after all this is over. Chu Luiyue looked up at the round, moon-like ball that was rapidly approaching her. The tyrannical power struck the glazed barrier, causing it to retreat. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly jumped. Even if the crystal barrier can protect me, I'll still fail if I go out like this. She made up her mind and suddenly jumped out of the crystal barrier. She wanted to avoid that attack. However, at this moment, she suddenly saw that within the sphere, there seemed to be a faintly discernible mass of black. The sinister and cold aura made one shudder. Her heart skipped a beat. xianxia actually, mobile users please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. Chapter 229. Just as Chu Luiyue was about to speak, xianxia seemed to have sensed something. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and he quickly rushed toward Chu Luiyue. He was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye he was in front of Chu Luiyue. Without hesitation he shot out another ray of force. The force merged with the ball, and the power that had been reduced increased again. It also approached Chu Luiyue at an even faster speed. A terrifying pressure came crushing over. Chu Luiyue felt as if her chest was being crushed by a huge rock. Even breathing became difficult, let alone speaking. Her face became even paler. She was about to be hit by the moon devourer. It's over. Chu Luiyue is going to lose. Why did she suddenly come out of the crystal barrier? She's hiding inside. She can't just stay inside. xianxia is so strong. He can definitely push her and the crystal barrier out of the arena. But this time she really can't turn the situation around. Almost everyone was watching this scene nervously. Some were already shaking their heads in pity, as if they had already predicted the final outcome. However, at this moment, a red figure suddenly appeared in front of Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue felt an itch on her cheek. She looked over and realized that the blood ferret had come out, and it was blocking in front of her. Dumpling, come back. Chu Luiyue was anxious. She gritted her teeth and shouted. Blood was already flowing out of the corner of her mouth. If she could rush to the front at this time, she would be able to see that Tuanzi's eyes were burning with anger. Its fur was already standing up, and it was obviously going to rush forward. xianxia narrowed his eyes and looked at the red furry thing that suddenly appeared in front of him. Blood ferret? Seeing that the blood ferret was full of hostility, he finally couldn't help but laugh. Chu Luiyue, is this your magical beast? Could it be that he was joking? Although the blood ferret was a third-grade magical beast, it had almost no combat ability. Normally it could be played with as a pet, but in a battle like this, it would be of no help to its owner. He had thought that Chu Luiyue was very powerful, but now it seemed that she was just a little girl with an immature mind. She didn't even have a magical beast. This blood ferret was most likely raised by her for fun, wasn't it? What a joke. Hearing his words, the hostility in Dumpling's eyes intensified. Mocking Chu Luiyue was mocking the blood ferret. The next moment, its small as of an eye's eyes. Its speed was extremely fast. Everyone could only see it drawing a red arc in the air. It was actually heading straight for the moon devourer. Hung twos to the end. A mantis is a mantis to stop. The power of the moon devourer was extremely powerful. This time, it was likely that it would directly take the blood ferret's life. Kill to kill it. Chu Luiyue wanted to stop it, but she couldn't say a complete word because of the pressure. Dumpling was too impulsive. Inside the moon devourer's ball was roar. Tuanzi directly pounced on the ball that was emitting a terrible power. Chu Luiyue was stunned. That's not right. She was already out of breath from the pressure, and the blood in her body was in turmoil. How could Dumpling just rush over? How did it get over? Before she could figure it out, something even more shocking happened. Dumpling opened its mouth and bit down. Crack. A crisp sound was heard. Dumpling had bitten a hole in the ball. Its cheeks were puffed up, and its head was almost as big as half its body. Crack, crack, crack. Gulp. Along with this series of sounds, Tuanzi actually chewed and swallowed the piece of meat that it had bitten off. The huge square was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Almost everyone's eyes widened as they looked at the scene in disbelief. Even Chu Luiyue's eyes twitched. What just happened? Dumpling ate that thing? Ate it? Although it looked like a glass crystal, it wasn't. It was full of condensed force. xianxia was stunned. He had spent a lot of effort to cultivate this move. Ever since he succeeded, he had always kept it as his trump card. Once he used it, he would never lose. Something like this had never happened before. While everyone was still in a daze, Dumpling opened its mouth again and bit off another big piece. The gap on the ball was even bigger now. As it moved, the force on the ball began to deplete rapidly. Soon it had swallowed half of the ball. Heng Jingshua started to feel uneasy. It couldn't go on like this. He didn't have time to think about what was going on with the blood ferret. He had to stop it, or else he quickly went forward. However, just as he moved, he realized that the blood ferret had grabbed the remaining half of the ball and ran away. As it ran, it ate the ball at an even faster speed. Crack, crack, crack. Heng Jingshua almost went crazy when he heard the sound. His origin power was contained in it. If it was swallowed, he didn't know how long it would take for him to recover. However, he soon realized that his speed was not as fast as the blood ferret's. Thus, he could only watch as the sphere became smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until, gulp, Dumpling stuffed the last bit into its mouth and swallowed it. Heng Jingshua's movements suddenly froze, and his body trembled slightly. It was gone. His force was gone just like that. Dumpling, are you okay? Chu Liwe finally recovered. She quickly went forward and looked at it nervously. Dumpling's eyes were wide open, and its body was swaying as if it couldn't stand properly. Chu Liwe was even more worried. I told you not to, burp. Dumpling suddenly let out a loud burp. Chu Liwe was speechless. Why did it look like it was drunk? Before she could react, Dumpling had already turned around and looked at Heng Jingshua. It suddenly spat out a black ball that flew toward Heng Jingshua. Heng Jingshua widened his eyes in shock. It actually spat out that thing? Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 230. Heng Jingshua retreated without hesitation, trying to avoid that thing. However, Dumpling had eaten a ball of force and her blood was boiling. She moved too quickly, and Heng Jingshua had no time to dodge. In a moment of desperation, he raised his arm in an attempt to block it. Puchi. Everyone saw a small black ball spit out from the blood ferret's mouth, and it pierced through Heng Jingshua's forearm. Red blood splattered everywhere. A bloody hole appeared on Heng Jingshua's arm. Ah! Heng Jingshua's face turned pale from the intense pain. However, compared to the pain, there was more fear on his face. He raised his injured arm with his other hand, and his whole body was trembling violently from fear. No, no. That thing could not be touched. A cold chill was spreading from the wound. Heng Jingshua's face was ashen. Then he took out a flying knife and stabbed it into the wound, gouging it out viciously. A piece of flesh fell off. When everyone saw this scene, their hearts were filled with horror. Heng Jingshua had gouged out a piece of flesh from his arm. What is he doing? Xuanhuan stood up abruptly, but he saw that Heng Jingshua did not stop. Instead, he continued to gouge out the flesh around the wound. One piece after another, and some were even attached to the skin. It looked extremely bloody and cruel. If it were anyone else, they would not be able to withstand such pain. However, Heng Jingshua seemed to have gone crazy and he did not stop. In the blink of an eye, 1/3 of the flesh on his arm had been gouged out, and the white bones were clearly visible. Jingshua, stop right now. However, Heng Jingshua did not seem to hear him at all. His body was trembling as if he was going to gouge out the flesh from his entire arm. Some of the more cowardly people had already covered their eyes, unable to bear to watch. Even if it was a one-hit kill, it would still be more satisfying than this. His actions were even scarier than killing someone. It sent chills down everyone's spine. Xuanhuan looked at Chu Liwe furiously and shouted in a low voice, Chu Liwe, what the hell is going on? What did you do to Jingshua? Chu Liwe spat out a mouthful of blood and raised his hand to wipe off the bloodstain on his lips. She felt the chaotic aura in her body gradually calm down. Only then did she look at Xuanhuan unhurriedly. There was a mocking smile on her lips, and there seemed to be ice condensing in her eyes. Director Xuanhuan, you should ask Heng Jingshua himself. He knew very well what he had done. What nonsense are you talking about? Xuanhuan pointed at Chu Liwe with an ugly expression. Jingshua is in this state because of you. Everyone can see it. You actually want to make a false countercharge. If you don't give me a satisfactory explanation for what happened today, don't even think about leaving. Hearing this, Sun Zhongyan laughed indifferently, but the pressure on his body gradually increased. Brother Xuanhuan, why can't we talk things over nicely? Why are you threatening the child? Xuanhuan took a deep breath, but when he saw that Heng Jingshua had no intention of stopping, he could not suppress the anger in his heart. Sun Zhongyan, are you trying to cover up for Chu Liwe? Sun Zhongyan's smile faded a little. Lu Yu is a student of Tianlu Academy. How can I let others bully him? Xuanhuan, you're an elder. Before this matter is investigated, it's best that you don't speak nonsense. Are you threatening me? I wouldn't dare. I'm just stating the facts. The two of them went back and forth and the atmosphere immediately became tense. Chu Luiyue hugged Dumpling in her arms. However, she saw it staring at her with a pair of dazed eyes. It tilted its head and rubbed against her palm eagerly and affectionately, as if it did not realize what earth-shattering thing it had just done. Her heart warmed. If it were not for Dumpling, she would have been in danger today. After patting Dumpling, Chu Luiyue looked at the two of them. Elder son, this matter was caused by the student. Let the student settle it himself. Sun Zhongyan looked at her hesitantly. With Xuanhuan acting like this, he definitely wouldn't take things lying down. How was she going to deal with this? All right. However, don't worry. The academy will definitely not let its students suffer. Chu Luiyue nodded. Thank you, Elder Sunday. Xuanhuan waved his sleeves fiercely. I'd like to see what kind of explanation you can give. Chu Luiyue did not immediately answer his question. Instead, she walked toward Heng Jingshuo. Heng Jingshuo's attention was all on his arm at this moment. He turned a deaf ear to everything else. He did not even realize that Chu Luiyue had walked in front of him. In fact, even if he knew, he could not care less. Chu Luiyue looked at him calmly, and her gaze quickly brushed past his bloody arm. She looked like she was smiling but not at the same time. Ah, it's already stained with blood. Then, even if you cut off your entire arm, it doesn't seem to be of any use. Hearing this, Heng Jingshuo's movements suddenly froze. A look of despair appeared in his eyes. How could he not know this? He was just holding on to his last hope. Bang. While he was in a daze, Chu Luiyue suddenly lifted her long leg and kicked him hard. Heng Jingshuo was not prepared. At this moment, he had no intention to fight. He was directly kicked out by Chu Luiyue. Chu Luiyue used all her strength this time. The two of them were not far from the edge of the arena. Heng Jingshuo flew out and directly out of the arena. Then he fell hard onto the ground. His body left a deep trail of blood on the ground, which made him look particularly pitiful. Chu Luiyue. Xuanhuan shouted angrily. What are you doing? Chu Luiyue's eyes curved. She smiled very politely. Oh, nothing. I just thought that since we're already at this stage, it's just right to end this competition first. After all, she still wanted to win. Xuanhuan's chest felt like it was being burned by a ball of fire. He almost could not control himself and went forward to teach Chu Luiyue a lesson himself. Chu Luiyue seemed to have predicted what he was going to do. She spoke first. Director Xuanhuan, don't you want to know why Heng Jingshuo suddenly became like this? Please take a look again. Xuanhuan turned his head to look. Heng Jingshuo fell down from the arena. However, he still seemed to be immersed in that strange state. He did not have time to get up from the ground. The first thing he did was to pick up the flying dagger that was thrown to the side. He gritted his teeth. As if he had made a huge decision, he slashed the dagger at his own shoulder. It looked like he was going to cut off his entire arm. Xuanhuan lifted his finger. A ray of force flew out and knocked the flying dagger out of his hand. If he lost this arm, Heng Jingshuo's future path of cultivation would be filled with difficulties. However, Heng Jingshuo hurriedly picked up the flying dagger. It looked like he was going to continue. Chu Luiyue's lips curled slightly. Her tone was cold. Once the 7 coldness poison comes into contact with blood, it will quickly seep into the limbs and bones. Although you seem to be helping him by stopping him like this, in reality, it's equivalent to forcing him onto the path of no return. Chapter 231. 7 Coldness Poison? Many people's expressions changed when they heard the name. Xuanhuan was stunned for a moment. 7 Coldness Poison was highly toxic. Once exposed, it would spread throughout the body. After 7 days, the person would freeze to death. Could it be that Heng Jingshuo was poisoned by the 7 Coldness Poison? He quickly walked towards Heng Jingshuo. When he got closer, he saw that there was indeed a thin layer of black frost on his arm. On top of the badly mutilated wound, it looked especially strange. This? Xuanhuan's heart skipped a beat. Heng Jingshuo had such a big wound on his body. The 7 Coldness Poison must have already entered his lungs and could not be saved. He was completely done for. Xuanhuan looked at Chu Luiyue furiously. Chu Luiyue, you are really vicious. How dare you poison someone in the Qingjiao competition? Chu Luiyue sneered. Dean Xuanhuan, you should take a closer look. This 7 Coldness Poison was obviously brought by Heng Jingshuo himself. When he attacked just now, he put the 7 Coldness Poison in the Moon Devourer. He wanted to kill me without anyone noticing. He did not expect my fiend to see through his plan and turn the tables on him. He is just reaping what he sowed. How can he blame me? She glanced at Heng Jingshuo coldly. I haven't held him accountable for trying to kill me. You're lying. Xuanhuan immediately recalled that the blood ferret had indeed spat out a ball of black stuff that injured Jianghu. Now that he thought about it, it must be the 7 coldness poison. That thing was obviously spat out from your fiend's mouth. It must be you, Dean Xuanhuan, you're so forgetful. Don't you remember that my fiend spat out that thing after swallowing the ball of moon devour? Chu Luiyue patted Dumpling and said slowly. Just as you said earlier, everyone saw it clearly. Xuanhuan was speechless. In fact, he had already realized that something was wrong and was starting to feel guilty. However, how could he admit it at this moment? If he admitted it, not only would Heng Jingchua, but he and the entire Taiyan Academy would also be humiliated. They would become the laughing stock of everyone. It was a taboo to use poison in the Qingjiao competition. Sun Zhongyan quickly stepped forward and took a closer look at Heng Jingchua. His expression turned cold. Although I'm not a celestial physician, I can still recognize 7 coldness poison. Xuanhuan, you better give everyone an explanation for this matter. Xuanhuan's face turned pale and for a moment he didn't know how to refute. Ah! At this moment Heng Jingchua had already chopped off his arm. Blood splattered everywhere. He let out an extremely miserable shriek that made one's heart tremble. The square was completely silent. Even those who didn't know what the 7 coldness poison was couldn't help but feel fear when they saw this scene. They didn't dare to say a word. Amidst this awkward and tense silence, a voice suddenly sounded. Miss Chu, you keep saying that Jingchua brought the 7 colds poison himself. But do you have any evidence? Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. Why is this Situ Xingqian so dramatic? What has this matter got to do with her? Situ Xingqian stepped forward and said, although your blood ferret spat out the 7 coldness poison after it swallowed the moon devourer, there's no 7 coldness poison in it. What if the 7 coldness poison wasn't in the moon devourer and the blood ferret brought it with him? A strange light flashed across her eyes. If there's really no problem between you and the blood ferret, why did you leave the crystal barrier despite knowing that the moon devourer was powerful? Eldest Princess Situ, your question is interesting. I'm clearly the one who was harmed, but you want me to prove my innocence? Chu Luiyue knitted his brows. Situ Xingqian calmly said, Jingchua is powerful. Jingchua is very powerful. He is more than 1 level higher than you. He can win against you no matter how he fights. Why would he use such a despicable method? Chu Luiyue laughed out loud when she heard this. It seems like eldest Princess Situ doesn't want to admit that I won against Situ Ziyue earlier. If I didn't see wrongly, he's still resting behind you. It's hard for him to even stand up. Situ Xingqian's expression changed slightly. It's fine to talk about other things, but Chu Luiyue is clearly humiliating me on purpose when he talks about my brother. That's just, since I can win against Situ Ziyue, why can't I win against Heng Jingchua? As for why he used such a method when he's so strong, only he knows. Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly, and he revealed a meaningful smile. After all, he even did something to Rong Jin. Once the sentence came out, it was no different from a clap of thunder. After being dazed for a while, everyone was in an uproar. Chu Luiyue's words clearly meant, Luyu, is what you said true? Asked Sun Zhongyan anxiously with tightly knitted brows. He was also poisoned. If you don't believe me, you can go and check. Oh, Director Xuanhuan and eldest Princess Situ should also take a look, in case you say that we did something in secret. Chu Luiyue generously lifted his chin. He's still over there. Sun Zhongyan and the rest hurriedly walked over. Zhuorong, who was looking after Rong Jin, was confused. 7 coldness poison? I didn't notice it. Xianxia rushed over first and grabbed Rong Jin's wrist again as his expression became increasingly solemn. He had already checked Rong Jin's pulse once, but he didn't find anything. It was the same this time. What did Chu Luiyue say? He turned around hesitantly. Sun Zhongyan hurriedly asked, how is it? Xianxia and Zhuorong fell silent. Sun Zhongyan's heart sank. At this point, Xuanhuan had already walked over. Chapter 232. Xuanhuan was speechless. The 7 coldness poison in Rong Jin's body was the best evidence. Even if he wanted to refute, he could not think of a single word at this point. He only felt embarrassed. This was even more so for Situ Xingqian. Previously, she was the one who suspected Chu Luiyue, and she was also the one who asked Chu Luiyue to take out the evidence. Now everything was clear. Countless pairs of eyes landed on her, making her feel uneasy. So Rong Jin was poisoned too. This must be Heng Jingchua's doing. Yeah. Chu Luiyue never interacted with Rong Jin from the start to the end. How could it be her? I knew it. Rong Jin and Heng Jingchua are clearly of the same level, so how could Heng Jingchua win so easily? It turns out that he used such despicable means. I think that he might not have won the previous competitions with his true abilities. I really don't know how Taiyan Academy teaches people to do such a thing. Also, Situ Xingqian has been speaking up for her academy's people from the start. Heng Jingchua clearly did something wrong, but she's suspicious. Rumors say that she's understanding, generous, and smart. Why can't I tell? Hey, it's just a rumor. You'll only know if it's true when you see it. Don't you think that she seems to be targeting Chu Luiyue? Could it be that Chu Luiyue offended her because he argued with her the day before? That's hard to say. After all, she's the high and mighty eldest princess. All sorts of discussions were like sharp knives that harshly pierced her body, making her feel extremely embarrassed and in pain. Situ Xingqian had been pampered since she was young. Even her father had never flared up at her. When had she ever been criticized like this? Situ Xingqian felt her face burning, and she wanted to find a hole to hide in. Xuanhuan, your student used such despicable means to win in the Qingjiao competition. Don't you have an explanation? Said Sun Zhongyan coldly with a solemn expression. That's right. The nature of this matter is very bad. We can't let it go just like that. Fu Yunshan, who had been sitting at the side and watching the competition, finally expressed his stance with an equally solemn expression. Previously, someone from Nanfeng Academy had also fought with Heng Jingchua. Besides, who knew if there was anyone else besides Heng Jingchua who was doing this? The two of them interrogated Xuanhuan, causing him to feel extremely embarrassed. I don't know about this either. You are the dean and he is a student of your academy. Whether you know it or not, you have to take responsibility for this matter, right? Sun Zhongyan interrupted him. Xuanhuan felt extremely sullen in his heart. He really didn't know. If he had known, he would never have let Heng Jingchua come. Furthermore, he wouldn't speak up for him. Just now, he thought that Taiyan Academy would still be the #1 warrior this year. However, in the blink of an eye, not only did they lose the #1 spot, but they even became the target of public criticism. In a moment of desperation, he could only look at Heng Jingchua and scold him. Speak. Where did you get this from? The 7 colds poison was not a poison that ordinary people could obtain. Heng Jingchua didn't come from a prestigious family and had always kept a low profile in school. This 7 coldness poison really came out of nowhere. However, Heng Jingchua ignored Xuanhuan. He just lay on the ground, curled up into a ball and trembled all over. Speak. Xuanhuan wanted to walk over and kick him, but he remembered that he had the 7 coldness poison in his body and stopped in his tracks. Heng Jingchua still didn't respond. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. He suddenly thought of something and walked over to Heng Jingchua. Luiyue, be careful. Sun Zhongyan hurriedly shouted. Chu Luiyue shook his head, indicating that he didn't need to worry. He took a few more steps forward and took a closer look. When he took a look, his expression changed slightly. He's dying. What? Everyone was shocked. Sun Zhongyan and Fu Yunshan immediately went forward. They saw that Heng Jingchua's broken arm had already frozen, and it had even spread to his entire face. The poison had taken effect. At this stage there was only death for him. He would die soon and there was no way to save him. Why did the poison take effect so quickly? Fu Yunshan frowned and asked. There should still be poison in his body. It was triggered by the 7 coldness poison, so... Sun Zhongyan's words cast a shadow over everyone's hearts. If that was the case, it proved that Heng Jingchua was under someone's orders. But in his current state, they would definitely not be able to find out who was behind this. Fu Yunshan was a little anxious. Is there no way to save his life first? Once we find out. Before he could finish, Heng Jingchua's body suddenly trembled violently. He let out a painful whimper between his lips and teeth. It was like a cry of despair in the dark night. It sent chills down everyone's spines. Soon, his movements gradually quieted down. Finally, there was no more sound. Fu Yunshan and Sun Zhongyan looked at each other, their eyes filled with worry. Chu Luiyue had already accepted this fact. He gently comforted Dumpling, who was in his arms, and fell into deep thought. No wonder Heng Jingchua was so flustered when he was injured. He was not only worried about the 7 coldness poison, but he was also worried that it would trigger the other poisons in his body. The other poisons must be something that the person behind him used to control him. In the end, he was just a pawn. But who was the person behind him? There was no need for that person to come in first place in the Qingjiao competition. What was the reason? Fu Yunshan thought for a while and said, although he's already dead, if we can find out what the poison in his body is, we might be able to gain something. Xuanhuan, you won't object to this, right? What could Xuanhuan say? He could only agree. Since things have already come to this, we should naturally discuss this together. We can also use this opportunity to clear Tai Yen Academy's name. He did not want his reputation to be tarnished because of Heng Jingchua. However, at that moment, a black fog suddenly emerged from Heng Jingchua's body. Cold. Sinister. Chu Liwei felt a strong sense of uneasiness. In the next moment, the black fog quickly spread and enveloped Heng Jingchua completely. Then, his body started to corrode at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not long after, his corpse transformed into a pool of blood on the ground and completely disappeared. The black fog also dissipated and disappeared without a trace. Only the messy bloodstains on the ground were left, indicating what had just happened. Digression. I went out for a day yesterday and accidentally fell asleep at night. Today's update will be updated at around midnight. I did not update on time, so I owe you one. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 233. No one had expected things to turn out this way. Now there were no clues at all. They could not find anything at all. Xuanhuan wanted to get to the bottom of this matter more than anyone else. Now that things had turned out this way, it was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. Let's put this matter aside for now. After the Qingjiao competition ends, we'll start investigating immediately. Sun Zhongyan said in a low voice. With such a thing happening, their hearts were filled with worry. However, it was obvious that the other party was meticulous and ruthless. It was definitely not something they could find out in a day or two. The Qingjiao competition had to continue. Fu Yunshan glanced at Xuanhuan as if he was looking at a joke. At this moment, the people from Tai Yen Academy were probably the ones who felt the most heartbroken. They did not know that such a huge scourge was hiding in the academy. Now that they thought about it, they felt extremely disgusted. Alright. Heng Jingchua is a student of Tai Yen Academy after all. I think we should let Brother Xuanhuan handle this matter. We'll assist you. How about that? Xuanhuan almost could not maintain his composure anymore. Whatever you say, it's the truth. Then he turned around and returned to his seat. It was obvious that he did not want to speak anymore. Even so, he felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. If he did not get to the bottom of this, he and the entire Tai Yen Academy would not be able to clear their names. Not only did he not get first place, but he also got himself into trouble. What was this? Chu Liwei put away her thoughts and smiled at Xiao Wenling and the rest. Oh right, according to the rules, you guys can continue to challenge me? Xiao Wenling and the rest, who were suddenly called out, shuddered and quickly shook their heads. No. I'm not challenging you. I'm not challenging you either. I am injured. I'm not going to compete. I think my ranking is quite good. Chu Liwei raised her brows. It was fine if they did not want to challenge her. Why did they make it seem like she was some demon? Looking at them, those who did not know would think that she was very scary. However, she did not know that she was indeed a very terrifying existence in their eyes. No, it should be said that most of the people in the square thought so. The scene of her blood ferret swallowing Heng Jingchua's moon devourer was still deeply imprinted in everyone's minds, and they couldn't forget it. At this time, who would be so reckless as to challenge Chu Liwei? What if the blood ferret bit his neck? Are you sure you don't want to continue? No. Several people denied in unison. Chu Liu's red lips curved into a brilliant smile. If that's the case, elder son, is the warrior competition over? Only then did Sun Zhongyan regain his senses. That's right. If no one challenged him, then Chu Liwei would be the true #1 warrior. His originally worried mood immediately lightened up, and the wrinkles on his face bloomed into a smile. I declare. The champion of this year's Qingjiao competition is Tianlu Academy's Chu Liwei. Heng Jingchua aside, Chu Liwei winning first place still made everyone from the Tianlu Academy celebrate. One had to know that they had not won first place for 3 whole years. With such a powerful genius, they naturally basked in the glory. Nanfeng Academy was still alright, but Tai Yen Academy was utterly humiliated. They were full of confidence when they came, but who knew that things would turn out like this? Xuanhuan took a deep breath and kept persuading himself. Being #1 in the warrior competition is not a big deal. There are still Xian Masters and Celestial Physician after them. The 3 Xian Master Academies are considered to be on par. No one knows who will win in the end. However, I still have Situ Xingqian. As long as I can become #1 in the Celestial Physician competition, I can redeem myself. Luyu, after the Qingjiao competition ends, you can choose from any of the 3 academies and enter their library. You can borrow books for free for a month. Have you thought of which academy you want to go to? Asked Sun Zhongyan cheerfully. Chu Liwei thought for a while and smiled. I haven't thought about it yet. Sun Zhongyan did not mind. Then think about it again. The Qingjiao competition will end in 2 days. It's the same for your selection. Nobody expected this girl to win first place, so it was normal for her to not think about it. Chu Liwei obediently agreed and returned to her seat. Ziyang was dazed. You actually won first place, Luyu? Are you still going to participate in the Xianmaster competition? Why not? Asked Chu Liwei. I'm sitting in the Xianmaster seat. Ziyang said sincerely, you've already won first place. You've already gotten first place in the warrior tournament and defeated so many people. You don't have to worry about us, do you? Chu Liwei stared at him intently. Didn't you say that the Qingjiao competition's rewards are very generous? Ziyang covered his face in despair. It's all my fault for saying that. The 3rd day of the competition ended just like that. The news of Chu Liwei winning first place quickly spread throughout the imperial city. At the same time, many people also knew that Heng Jingxue had poisoned her. At night at Crown Prince Mansion, Rong Jin lay on the bed with a pale face. Chu Xianmin was carefully serving him in front of the bed. However, her gaze was somewhat erratic. In actual fact, she was listening to Zhuorong and the Empress talking outside the screen. It's our negligence that caused His Highness to be poisoned. Luckily, the dosage was small, and His Highness had always been strong, so it wasn't very serious. Now that the remaining poison has been removed, he just needs to rest for a while and he'll be fine. This was Zhuorong's voice. In the academy he was the teacher and Rong Jin was the student. However, this was Crown Prince Mansion, so they naturally had to follow the hierarchy. Teacher Zhuorong, you're too polite. If it weren't for you, the Crown Prince would have. The Empress immediately rushed over when she heard the news. Even though Zhuorong said that Rong Jin was fine, she still felt scared. Zhuorong sighed. Actually, the person you should thank isn't me but Luyu. If she didn't discover it early, we wouldn't have known that His Highness was poisoned. Once the time was delayed, it would be really dangerous. The Empress paused. Chu Liwei. Yes. The Empress was silent for a while before she softly said, She's a good girl. She's a good child. Don't worry, when there's an opportunity, Ben Gong will personally go and thank her. Chu Xianmin unconsciously clenched her fists. Chu Liwei. Chu Liwei again. Now even the Empress said that. Water. A weak moan was heard. Chu Xianmin hurriedly looked at the bed and saw that Rong Jin had opened his eyes. Your Highness, you're awake? That's great. Water is here. Chu Xianmin hurriedly passed the water beside her over and carefully fed him. The people outside heard the commotion and hurriedly came in. When the Empress saw that Rong Jin was awake, her eyes turned red, and she directly pounced on him. Jin, you're finally awake. Chu Xianmin hurriedly retreated, but the Empress didn't even look at her. She couldn't help but secretly bite her lips. Rong Jin opened his eyes and asked with difficulty. Did Liwei save me? You can find a better reading experience from Love Network. Why is Rong Jin so obsessed with me all of a sudden? What exactly did I feed Rong Jin? However, seeing Rong Jin's resolute attitude, the Empress didn't dare to insist. Allow me to think about this matter again. At the very least, we have to wait until the Qingjiao competition ends. Rong Jin also knew that it was a little overboard to suddenly raise this request, so he didn't force it. Seeing that the Empress had softened her stance, he stopped while he was ahead. Then I'll thank you first, Mother. The Empress looked at him deeply before she turned around and left. Her thin brows were knitted together. Zhuorong was forced to listen to this conversation at the side, and he was also very embarrassed. He found an excuse and left. Very quickly, only Rong Jin and Chu Xianmin were left in the room. Rong Jin lay back on the bed and looked at the curtains above his head in a daze. However, things related to Chu Liwei kept appearing in his mind. Thinking about it carefully, even though their engagement had lasted for many years, the two of them didn't have much interaction. Now that he wanted to think about it, he realized that it was the same thing over and over again. Rong Jin was a little disappointed. However, once he thought about how Chu Liwei saved his life, he felt a little happy. As long as she wasn't engaged, nobody in the imperial city could fight with him for her. Thinking of this, he looked at Chu Xianmin at the side and hurriedly asked, Oh, right. Minmin, weren't you very close to Luyu in the past? You should know what she likes, right? What kind of jewelry does she like? What does she usually like to do? Hurry up and tell me. Chu Xianmin almost sneered out loud. What a joke. The crown prince, who used to avoid Chu Luiyue like the plague, actually wants to remarry. He even started to ask me what Chu Luiyue likes. I've never had such thoughts about her. I really didn't consider her at all when I asked all these questions. Chu Xianmin suppressed the jealousy and anger in her heart and lightly said, "Your Highness, you should take care of your body first. I'll naturally tell you all these things one by one." Rong Jin was then relieved. He mumbled for a while before he fell into a deep sleep. Chu Xianmin looked at him coldly. After a while, she revealed a sarcastic smile. Chu Luiyue directly returned to her residence. When she went up to the second floor, she almost habitually walked to the window and looked at Yifeng courtyard. Many leaves had fallen in the courtyard, and there was no one on the rattan chair. It looked a little cold. It seems like Rong Xiao hasn't returned yet. She slightly knitted her brows and hid the faint disappointment in her heart. Thinking about it carefully, Rong Xiao had only left for 3 days. She actually felt a little unaccustomed to it. This feeling of being tied down by something was really not good. Chu Luiyue stood quietly for a while and planned to close the window. When Chu Luiyue jumped into the lake, she saw the white fog above quickly disperse in all directions. The teleportation array below shone brightly and quickly enveloped her. The lake water consciously parted. Only then did Chu Luiyue realize that the light from the teleportation array automatically formed a barrier around her, perfectly protecting her. The surrounding lake water also avoided it because of this. Chu Luiyue looked at the silver barrier around her strangely. Why would this teleportation array automatically protect her? It wasn't as if she had never seen a teleportation array before. She had even built many of them herself, so she knew more about them. The biggest use of a normal teleportation array was to connect 2 spaces, allowing people to quickly travel from one place to another. Inside the teleportation array, because it was connected to the void, there would often be violent energy flowing around. It was inevitable that there would be some danger when passing through it. Sometimes, in order to avoid this, some small mechanisms would be specially set up when building the teleportation array. For example, when someone passed through the teleportation array and the teleportation array sensed their aura, it would automatically form a barrier to protect them. However, she didn't know that there was a teleportation array here and had never used it before. How could this happen? However, this doubt only flashed through her mind. In the next moment, she felt her body being pulled down by a force. Her surroundings instantly fell into darkness. Wonderful book house. And once a warrior above stage 7 left heaven's canopy, their realm would be suppressed to stage 7 and below. Chu Luiyue secretly guessed Rong Xiao's true strength, but she didn't expect him to be so powerful. He wasn't even 20 years old this year, right? This level of talent, even compared to her previous life, was not inferior in the slightest. Don't worry. Even if it's outside heaven's canopy, I can still send you on your way. Rong Xiao smiled casually as if he didn't care about the other party at all. But Chu Luiyue's sharp eyes saw that the corner of his clothes seemed to be stained with blood. Ah! Your Highness, you're already injured and don't have the strength to fight anymore. I'm curious, how do you plan to kill me? The high and mighty Your Highness, the Holy Sun, has actually fallen to such a state. TSK. If this news were to spread, I'm afraid you won't have the face to continue sitting in this position. But you don't have to worry about these things. After all, your life is going to end here today. As he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his hand. He raised a blood-colored sickle. Blood sickle / The surrounding heaven and earth force rapidly gathered. His blood-colored sickle suddenly slashed down. A blood-colored light instantly flew toward Rong Xiao. Rong Xiao waved his sleeves and a silver disc flew out rapidly. Boom! 2 powerful forces fiercely collided together. The sea water violently surged. Soon the silver disc suddenly cracked. Crack. Chapter 237. Countless streaks of light scattered in all directions. Rong Xiao quickly retreated, but the crimson scythe quickly caught up. Chu Luiyue stood behind a piece of rock, but she was still blown so hard by the strong wind that she could barely stand. Rong Xiao was already injured previously, and this attack put him at a disadvantage. Your Highness, let's end it here. The black-robed man shouted coldly, and the crimson scythe suddenly changed into several shadows. They all rushed toward Rong Xiao. In the blink of an eye they surrounded Rong Xiao. At this moment Rong Xiao raised his wrist. Turbulent waves of seawater suddenly shot up to the sky. It formed a huge water screen in front of him. The crimson scythe rushed into the water screen, but it was as if it had sunk into a swamp, and its speed immediately decreased by a lot. The black-robed man seemed to be shocked. You can actually control the sea in heaven's canopy? Rongxiao chuckled. Not much, but it's enough to deal with you. After saying that, he suddenly snapped his fingers. A silver flame suddenly appeared at the tip of his long, white fingers. Go! Accompanied by this cold voice, the silver flame lightly landed on the water screen. Boom! In an instant, it was as if a spark had fallen into a pot of oil, and a raging fire instantly burned. Above the deep blue water screen, a bright and cold silver flame instantly ignited. It covered the sky and covered the earth. The black-robed man sensed that something was wrong and immediately wanted to retreat. However, at this moment, another water screen rose up behind him. The silver flame quickly spread and burned over. Two burning water screens, one in front and one behind, trapped the black-robed man in the middle. Gradually, the crimson scythes that were trapped in the water screen also started to melt. The black-robed man finally panicked. He originally thought that Rongxiao's realm was suppressed and would definitely not be his match, but he did not expect him to be able to use such a move. Your Highness, your strength is indeed not to be underestimated. Unfortunately, I came prepared this time. As soon as he finished speaking, the surrounding heaven and earth origin force rapidly surged into his body. The aura around him surged crazily. Soon, Chu Luiyue sensed a ripple in the distant heaven's canopy. That man had actually forcefully raised his strength to the peak of rank 6. When it sensed the aura of a rank 7 warrior, heaven's canopy would become unstable. He had clearly intentionally stuck his realm at this boundary. Outside the heaven's canopy, the highest level one can reach is the peak of the 6th level. Your Highness, the suppression of your realm is too strong. How can you be a match for me now? The black-robed man let out a strange laugh, and a white chain suddenly flew out from under his robe. The chain seemed to be made of carved bones and it emitted a cold aura. If one looked carefully, they would be able to see that it was covered in dried blood. It made people shudder with fear. The chain flew out and pierced into the water screen. The chain was intercepted again, but when the silver flame neared, the dark red blood on the white bones suddenly wriggled. The silver flame licked the chain crazily, but only a series of crackling sounds could be heard. Vaguely, it sounded like the mournful cries of a malicious spirit. A hole was gradually being devoured on the water screen. The last layer of flame was extinguished, and the chain quickly flew toward Rongxiao. Rongxiao suddenly looked up. His gaze was deep. He abruptly raised his hand and grabbed the chain tightly. The black-robed man suddenly looked up and laughed. Ah, do you think this is still within heaven's canopy? Don't think I don't know that the golden body of the saint cannot be summoned outside heaven's canopy. You must die today. After saying that, he shouted in a deep voice. Ghost chain, explode. Bam, bam, bam. The white bones on the chain suddenly exploded. Rongxiao flung his wrist. The chain shook violently. The powerful force quickly spread to the black-robed man's body. Boom. A terrifying aura spread out in all directions with the two of them as the center. The two of them were sent flying by the impact of the force. Shui roared and flew out quickly. It originally wanted to catch Rongxiao, but the force was too strong. In addition, it was already injured, so it fell down together with Rongxiao. Shui's claws scratched a deep trench on the ground, and it finally stopped when it hit the reef. Although Rongxiao had Shui as a buffer, his arms still hit the reef heavily. On the other hand, although the black-robed man was also affected, it was not as serious as Rongxiao, and he quickly stabilized himself. The outcome of the two of them was obvious. Rongxiao's hand was on the rough reef. Just as he was about to turn around, he suddenly realized something and looked up. Behind the reef, in the shadows, there was a pair of clear eyes. It was a face that he couldn't be more familiar with. Why was she here? Before Rongxiao could think clearly, he felt a cold wind coming from behind. He quickly and resolutely shouted in a low voice. Dodge. However, Chu Luiyue did not dodge. Instead, her eyes seemed to be burning with flames. When she exchanged glances with Rongxiao, she clearly saw the bloodstains on Rongxiao's face and body. Ever since they met, the Rongxiao she saw was always strong and calm. Even when he was fighting the black flying python, his clothes were always neat and tidy. She had never seen him in such a sorry state. She did not know why, but a nameless anger suddenly rose from the bottom of her heart. In midair, the blood-red sharp blade flew over and was about to land on Rongxiao's body. Chu Luiyue didn't even think as she jumped and flipped over from behind the reef. Immediately she pulled Rongxiu away. At this moment the blood-red sharp blade had arrived. It was close at hand. She could already clearly feel the terrifying pressure. She grabbed Rongxiu's hand tightly and with a turn of her feet, she blocked in front of Rongxiu. Rongxiu immediately guessed what she was planning to do and his heart suddenly tightened. With her current strength, how could she withstand this attack? A Wu dumpling suddenly flew out and went straight for the blood-red blade. Its small body was overturned in a blink of an eye. The strength of a 6th-stage peak warrior was extremely terrifying and it was not something it could handle. On the other side, Shui struggled to stand up, but with a few more wounds on its body, it could not get up at all. Chu Luiyue suddenly pushed Rongxiu away. Rongxiu's heart was empty and in the next moment, he pulled her tightly into his arms. Chu Luiyue suddenly bumped into his chest and the tip of her nose hurt. But at this moment she did not care about this and the first sentence that came out of her mouth was, "Danger! Run." Digression, Kavenka is in so much pain that he wishes he was dead. The remaining 2 updates will probably be released in the afternoon. Kavenka is so unbearable. Mobile users, please browse and read. Chapter 238. Rongxiu held her tightly in his arms. When he heard her voice, he suddenly froze. She actually told him to run first? Did she know what she meant by doing this? Seeing that Rongxiu didn't move, Chu Luiyue anxiously shouted again. "Hurry!" This shout woke Rongxiu up from his dream. He looked at the girl in his arms. She was slender, young, but brave and fearless. At this moment, his figure was finally clearly reflected in her eyes. He heard his heart beating rapidly, and even the blood in his limbs and bones surged. Deep in his heart, it was as if thousands of joy were surging up one after another, drowning him. Chu Luiyue already felt the imminent danger behind her. Her hair stood on end. She wanted to push Rongxiu away, but he hugged her so tightly that she couldn't break free. This person. He was usually a strategist who could decide victory from 1,000 miles away. Why was he suddenly stunned at this moment? "Rongxiu, do you really want to die here?" Chu Luiyue asked through gritted teeth. Rongxiu's eyes were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom. It was like a whirlpool that wanted to swallow her. His thin lips lifted slightly, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Of course not. It wasn't easy to wait for this day. How could he die? He looked deeply at Chu Luiyue and an undercurrent surged. Chu Luiyue didn't know how to describe his gaze, and the words that were about to come out of her mouth suddenly couldn't come out. The next moment, he lowered his gaze and his gaze fell on Chu Luiyue's slender and fair neck. She had tied the colored glass barrier around her neck. With a light hook of his finger, the colored glass barrier fell into his palm. Whoosh! He circulated his force, and the colored glass barrier instantly unfolded. The barrier, glowing with a faint silver color, immediately enveloped the two of them. Boom! The powerful force rushed over and crashed into the colored glass barrier. The colored glass barrier suddenly trembled. However, in the end he still managed to isolate that ball of energy. Chu Luiyue was slightly shocked. Looks like this glazed barrier that Rongxiu gave her wasn't ordinary either, to actually be able to forcefully withstand the attack of a peak tier 6 powerhouse. Is it a woman? The black-robed man stood in the air and looked down at the two of them. To be precise, he was looking at Chu Luiyue. Although she was tightly held in Rongxiu's arms and her face could not be seen, one could still tell that she was a young girl with a graceful figure. After a brief moment of dead silence, he suddenly laughed out loud. Ha! So that was how it was. So that was how it was. No wonder the Saint Prince was willing to stay outside heaven's canopy for such a long time. It was all because of a woman. Rumor has it that His Highness, the Holy Sun, does not get close to women and is proud and aloof. Who would have thought that he would actually lose his head over a woman? If this news were to spread, it would probably cause a huge commotion. Chu Luiyue was even more confused. Why did these words sound so strange? Could it be that Rongxiu had always been inside heaven's canopy? How could this be? Close your eyes. Rongxiu lowered his head and gently kissed her eyes. His voice was low and gentle. Chu Luiyue did not know why, but she obediently closed her eyes and leaned into his arms. The moment he opened his mouth, that terrifying threat seemed to quietly dissipate. It was as if as long as he was around, all the dangers were not worth mentioning. She did not know where this inexplicable peace of mind came from, but she seemed to be very used to it. Seeing that she was obediently lying in his arms, Rongxiu's eyes flashed with a dark light, and his arms tightened. Then he finally looked at the black-robed man. A faint golden light appeared in his eyes that were as deep as the night. The black-robed man's laughter suddenly stopped. Just now, Rongxiu raised his hand and lightly pointed forward. A dazzling golden flame suddenly appeared at his fingertip. The saint's golden body? How could this be? This is outside heaven's canopy, Qi. Rongxiu flicked his finger, and that golden flame instantly flew out. It was just a small ball, but in the eyes of the black-robed man, it was like a life-taking talisman. He retreated in fear and used all his speed, hoping to get away as soon as possible. How could this be? How could this be? Outside heaven's canopy, the realm of cultivators would be suppressed to below stage 7 warriors. Logically speaking, it was absolutely impossible for him to summon the saint's golden body. But now, Rongxiu's aura was indeed much stronger than before. Even though he had already used all his strength to escape, the golden flame's speed was even faster. Not long later, it silently landed on the dark blue sea surface. The moment that golden flame touched the sea surface, everything in the surroundings seemed to have stopped. The waves of the sea suddenly stopped and the waves hit the reef. Even the 2 water curtains burning with silver flames froze. The black-robed man only felt as if there was a mountain pressing down on him. His legs felt as if they were filled with lead, and he started to find it difficult to move. This was the pressure of an absolute powerhouse. He turned around in a panic and saw Rongxiu standing by the shore, hugging the woman in his arms tightly and looking at him coldly and disdainfully. That gaze was as if he was looking at an ant that was about to die. Cold. Indifferent. No one dared to have the slightest intention of disobedience. The next moment, Rongxiu's lips moved slightly. Break. With that, the place where the golden flame was suddenly collapsed, revealing a piece of darkness in the void. That was the collapse of space. The black-robed man was horrified. He couldn't care about anything else and turned to run. But his body didn't seem to have any reaction. He looked down in shock and realized that his entire body was also frozen by that terrifying power, and he couldn't move at all. And at this moment, with the golden flame as the center, the surrounding space started to collapse. The black void expanded as if it was forming a huge black hole. Seawater, waves, flames, everything was swallowed into that collapsing space. Soon, that black color had spread to the black-robed man's feet. No. He screamed in horror and frantically tried to move his body, but it was futile. In the end, he could only watch as his feet disappeared along with the collapse of space. Everything happened so quickly that he didn't even feel the pain. The collapsing space had already swallowed his thighs. Only when his waist was also crushed did the bone-piercing pain finally come. The mournful screams sounded particularly eerie in the empty sea. He looked at Rongxiu with hatred and said sternly, "Saint," forcefully summoning the golden body outside heaven's canopy. "Aren't you afraid of being punished?" Rongxiu narrowed his eyes. Noisy. The speed of the collapsing space became even faster. Before the black-robed man could finish his sentence, his entire body was swallowed. If Chu Liwa looked back at this moment, he would see that more than half of the space between the sea and the sky had already collapsed. The huge black void strangely and quietly appeared there. It was hard to imagine what kind of person could have such a powerful means. Mobile users, please browse for a better reading experience from Love Network. Chapter 239. Rongxiu withdrew the golden flame, and the black void began to gradually recover. When everything returned to normal, the golden light in Rongxiu's eyes finally dissipated, and the deep gaze returned. Immediately he gently patted Chu Liyue's back. "All right." Chu Liyue slowly raised her head and glanced at him. Rongxiu looked no different from before. But she faintly felt that the Rongxiu here seemed to be different from the one she saw before. She wondered if it was because of the so-called Holy Sun identity. Suppressing the doubts in her heart, she turned back to take a look. The magnificent sea had returned to its calm state. The 2 burning water curtains from before had completely dissipated and disappeared without a trace. And the man in the black robe had indeed disappeared without a trace. "He's dead." Rongxiu faintly responded with a as if he didn't care. Chu Liyue's heart suddenly jumped. The man in the black robe was a peak 6th rank warrior. He actually died just like that. And there was no corpse left. How did Rongxiu do it? Although she was leaning in Rongxiu's arms just now and didn't see anything, she could still hear the movements and sounds clearly. She could roughly guess what had happened. But she really couldn't imagine how Rongxiu killed the man in the black robe. He had been standing here holding her and didn't even move a step. She had too many questions in her heart, but when the words reached her mouth she suddenly couldn't speak. Rongxiao suddenly took out a white handkerchief and carefully wiped the blood off his hands. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. It was the one he lent her the last time. The two of them suddenly fell into silence. Chu Luiyue then realized that her hands were still tightly clutching the front of his clothes, and her whole body was tightly in his arms. An ambiguous and subtle aura gradually spread out. Now that she had calmed down, she came back to her senses and gradually remembered what she had done. Instantly he was dumbfounded. Did she just jump out for Rongxiao? At that time she didn't even seem to care about her own life. She just did it so straightforwardly. Her fingers curled up slightly, not knowing if she should retreat first. Being so close to Rongxiao made her face burn. "What are you thinking about?" asked Rongxiao casually as he glanced down and guessed her thoughts. "I think you and I, it seems strange." Chu Luiyue blurted out, but she immediately stopped mid-sentence. No matter how he phrased it, it didn't seem right. Rongxiao chuckled and put away the handkerchief. After making sure that there was no blood on his hands, he finally nodded in satisfaction and looked at her. "Me and you? What's wrong?" Chu Luiyue coughed and pushed him, but realized that she couldn't push him away. She could only give up. "Nothing, I was just thinking, what did that person mean when he said that you would be punished for summoning the golden body of the Son of Saint outside heaven's canopy?" Rongxiao paused and suddenly reached out to hold her face. Chu Luiyue could only look up and meet his eyes. "Coincidentally, I also want to ask a question. When we were in danger just now, you stood in front of me and let me go first. What do you mean by that?" His tone was gentle and slow, but his eyes were deep and serious. Chu Luiyue was instantly embarrassed. In fact, she also didn't know why she did that. She had a vague guess in her heart, but she couldn't say it out loud. "You haven't answered my question. As long as you tell me the answer to this question, I will tell you everything you want to know." Rongxiao. Chu Luiyue stared at him. He was obviously doing it on purpose. Rongxiao looked at her embarrassed face and really loved it. He inched closer. The two of them were so close that they could hear each other's breathing. He chuckled. "Actually, I have an answer, but I don't know if it's right. Why don't I tell you and you just have to say if it's right or not? How about it?" Chu Luiyue blinked in a daze and saw that his eyes had suddenly become exceptionally dark. Her heart suddenly skipped a beat. Immediately, his fingers slid down from her cheeks and pinched her chin, forcing her to raise her face slightly. He lowered his head and moved closer. Chu Luiyue only felt something soft and slightly cold on her lips. That familiar cold fragrance suddenly became rich, and in an instant, it permeated between his lips and teeth. Chu Luiyue widened her eyes, and her heart felt as if it had been heavily rubbed by something. It was unbelievably sweet and soft. Rongxiao was kissing her? The sea breeze was gentle and the moonlight was bright. She could even see the faint shadows cast by his thick eyelashes on his eyelids. Rongxiao originally wanted to kiss her lightly, but the moment he touched that incredible softness, he felt as if something in his heart had suddenly collapsed. Almost instinctively he bit her lips, grinding and sucking on them. A blazing heat spread from between their lips. Chu Luiyue felt as if her whole body was burning, and her limbs were a little weak. She finally found her reason and pushed Rongxiao. However, she was no match for Rongxiao. At this time her limbs were even weaker and her two pushes were like scratching an itch. Not only did she not push Rongxiao away, but she also gently tickled his heart, making him more restless. His arm wrapped around her slim waist, and she was almost embedded into his body. Chu Luiyue spat out a few vague syllables between her lips and teeth. Rongxiao then slightly let go of her and looked at her with a deep gaze. "What do you think of this answer?" As soon as he spoke, Chu Luiyue realized that his voice was very hoarse, as if he was restraining something. Her face turned even redder and she glared at him. He was still as shameless as ever. Little did she know that at this time, her eyes were watery from the kiss, and her face was like a peach blossom. This glare made half of Rongxiao's body go limp. The other half was the exact opposite. He gently rubbed his fingers on her cheeks and with an ambiguous burning sensation, he murmured in a low voice, "It seems wrong. Then what about this?" As soon as he finished speaking, he lowered his head and kissed her lips again. This time his movements were very fast. Before she could react, he had already attacked her. Chu Luiyue was ashamed and angry. In a fit of anger, she simply started to counterattack. She released her hands that were originally holding onto his chest and reached up, hooking them around his neck and pressing her whole body closer. At the same time she imitated him and bit his lips, gently licking them. Rongxiao's body stiffened. Did she know what she was doing? Chu Liyue felt that he suddenly stopped, and she was even more unconvinced, so she went in a little further. The two of them touched, lingering in the air. Rong Xiao sucked in a breath of cold air. Digression. Congratulations on picking up a broken February mobile phone. User, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 240. I have to stop. Rong Xiao thought to himself. Otherwise he really couldn't tell what he would do. However, she was so sweet and soft that he couldn't control himself. He had been waiting for this day for too long. One time, another time. Rong Xiao's hand held her waist tightly. She could feel that he was suppressing something through her clothes. The girl in his arms gradually softened into a ball, as if he could knead her however he wanted. She belonged to him. She belonged only to him. Chu Liyue gradually felt that Rong Xiao's aura was becoming a little dangerous. She instinctively felt that it wasn't good to continue like this. Finally, she took the initiative to step back. She tilted her head and leaned against his shoulder. Rong Xiao's hand rubbed her waist a few times. It was a little itchy. He took a deep breath and finally suppressed the impulse in his heart. His voice was terrifyingly hoarse. If you do this again next time, Chu Liyue blinked and deliberately asked, if you do this again next time, what will you do? Rong Xiao looked at her meaningfully. There seemed to be sparks in his eyes that would burn at any time. Of course, you're welcome. Chu Liyue was speechless. As expected, it wasn't a wise choice to be thick-skinned with someone. However, seeing Rong Xiao like this, she didn't dare to continue teasing him deliberately. She quietly held his hand. Rong Xiao rubbed his chin against the soft hair on the top of her head. Then he looked into her eyes and said seriously, you haven't said whether this answer is right or not. His eyes were calm, but there was a hint of nervousness in his voice. Chu Liyue never thought that someone as powerful as Rong Xiao would feel nervous. He was waiting for her answer. How important was it in his heart that he would be so careful and cautious when asking for an answer? Chu Liyue stared at him. Many scenes flashed through her mind. She was stunned when she first saw him by the lake. She was surprised when she saw him again at the palace banquet. She was moved at Wanling Mountain. Scenes flashed by one after another, and in the end they all disappeared. All that was left was the face of the evildoer before him, which became increasingly clear. In fact, she had always treated Rong Xiao differently, but she was unwilling to admit it for various reasons. But now that he thought about it, those were just some unimportant reasons. Even if she had a heart-wrenching past, that was all in her previous life. Now, there was someone who was willing to embrace her new life and give her bright and warm expectations. She stood on her tiptoes and planted a light kiss on his lips. Rong Xiao's pupils shrank, but there were thousands of fireworks in his eyes. Rong Xiao. She looked up at him and said in the same serious tone, for me, there is only one question and one answer in my life. There's no betrayal and no regret. Do you understand? Her voice was very calm, but there were too many emotions in her eyes. Those unbearable past were her eternal scars. She definitely couldn't bear a second betrayal. Rong Xiao's heart seemed to be clenched by something, and it hurt. After a moment, his thin lips lifted slightly and he chuckled, what a coincidence, so do I. He held her hand tightly and looked into her eyes. When we go back, I'll go to your residence to propose marriage. Chu Liyue was stunned and asked subconsciously, so soon? Rong Xiao raised his eyebrows. Is it very soon? But I've been waiting for a long time. As long as he didn't kidnap her back, he wouldn't be able to sleep well. Chu Liyue wanted to say something, but when she looked up and saw his expression, her heart suddenly moved. For some reason she always seemed to be exceptionally easy to talk to when facing Rong Xiao. Rong Xiao didn't dare to touch her again for fear that he couldn't control himself, so he could only settle for the second best and kiss her forehead. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly stopped and leaned on Chu Liyue's shoulder. Chu Liyue glanced sideways and realized that Rong Xiao's face was exceptionally pale. You seem to have fainted. Rong Xiao? On the fourth day of the Qingjiao competition, the first 3 days of the warrior competition had finally ended. The Xianmaster students from the 3 academies were all eager to get a good ranking in the Xianmaster competition today. Unlike the one-on-one competition a few days ago, the Xianmaster competition was held together by everyone. The huge arena had been evenly divided into squares. A chessboard was placed in each square. There were 5 Xian formations on each chessboard. Whoever could solve these 5 Xian formations the fastest would be first. At a glance, many people were already in position, waiting for the competition to start. However, there was some commotion on Tianlu Academy's side. Lu Yu isn't here yet? Bai Qin asked with a frown. Mu Hongyu shook her head. She was also rather anxious. When we went to look for her this morning, she wasn't at her residence. We thought she was here first, but we didn't expect her to be here either. I already asked Xinhu to go back and look for her. As she spoke, she turned to look at the entrance and saw Xinhu panting as he returned. However, Chu Luiyue wasn't behind him. Mu Hongyu's heart sank, but she still walked forward quickly and asked, "Where's Lu Yu? Did you find her?" Xinhu placed one hand on his knee and panted heavily as he waved his hand repeatedly. "No. I looked everywhere, but I didn't see her." Mu Hongyu was silent for a moment before she suddenly thought of something. "What about Juyo Tower? Did you look for her there? She usually likes to go there to cultivate. Did she forget to come out?" Xinhu shook his head. "I already asked. She didn't go there yesterday or today." Chapter 241. Chu Luiyue naturally didn't know that everyone was frantically searching for her in the capital. She only cared about Rongxiu now. After Rongxiu fainted, she took his pulse and found that the situation in his body was very strange. She actually couldn't detect Rongxiu's yuan meridian. After trying twice, she could only vaguely feel that there seemed to be two forces colliding in Rongxiu's body. She couldn't sense anything else. Chu Luiyue guessed that Rongxiu's coma should be related to forcefully summoning the so-called Holy Sun's golden body. It was impossible to forcefully raise one's strength to a stage 7 warrior outside heaven's canopy. It was just that she had never heard of anyone who could do this before, so she didn't know what was going on. She carefully let Rongxiu lean on a relatively flat reef. Looking at his pale face, she felt a little anxious. Shui walked over from the side and rubbed against her leg, whimpering softly. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. "You're saying that he's fine?" Shui nodded and secretly gave its master a look of disdain. Its master was so powerful that this little bit of trouble was really nothing. If Chu Luiyue didn't come, he could still go back. But since she was here and the two of them happened to be engaged, it was normal for him to take advantage of this opportunity to play the trick of injuring himself. Shui simply lay down. Anyway, that man from the unparalleled palace was already dead. It wouldn't be too late to go back after its master recovered. Seeing Shui's attitude, Chu Luiyue felt a little relieved. Since Shui felt that Rongxiu was fine, then there was no need to worry too much. She half-hugged Rongxiu and leaned on the reef quietly, waiting for him to wake up. Dumpling finally woke up and climbed onto her shoulder again, rubbing against her face pitifully. Chu Luiyue glanced at it. Dumpling was indeed not injured. Somehow, its resistance to beating seemed to be getting stronger and stronger. The sea breeze at night was a little salty, and the moonlight shone on the surface of the sea. The surroundings were barren. But Chu Luiyue didn't feel lonely. On the contrary, this was a rare peaceful night since her rebirth. She lowered her eyes and looked at Rongxiu, her gaze lingering on his face. In fact, there was one thing that she didn't tell Rongxiu just now. When he summoned the golden body of the saint, his entire person became different. Cold, indifferent, high up above. She had never seen such a Rong before. But she faintly felt a little familiar. She didn't know where this familiarity came from. She was certain that she had never seen him before. As long as she would definitely remembers. Teat, she, but when she was facing Rongxiu, she always felt an inexplicable sense of security. "Have we met before?" Chu Luiyue muttered softly. Then she felt that her thought was a little ridiculous, so she smiled and closed her eyes. Her voice was very soft, and it dissipated in the night wind. But she didn't see Rongxiu's eyelashes trembling slightly. At the Qingjiao competition, Chu Luiyue was indeed missing. Sun Zhongyan still had to take care of the Qingjiao competition, so he handed this matter to Bai Chen and the rest. Although they were also very anxious, they couldn't make it public now. Even when he went to look for Chuning, he did it secretly. Chuning wanted to use the Imperial Guards, but he gave up after thinking about it. He only asked a few of his trusted subordinates to secretly ask around in the capital. He even personally went to the Zhenbao Pavilion. Yangu was also surprised when he heard that Chu Luiyue was missing, and he agreed to help without hesitation. Chuning was just trying his luck, but he didn't expect Yangu to be so willing to help. He was both grateful and confused. The Zhenbao Pavilion had an extraordinary status, and Yangu was even more so as the second in charge. But he seemed to be very concerned about you, or whether it was the previous time when he booked the entire Phoenix restaurant or this time, it was not something that an ordinary friendship could do. He tried to ask, but Yengu only smiled and said that he got along well with Chu Luiyue. Now that she was the champion of the Qingjiao competition, her future was limitless, so it was normal for him to want to get along with her. Chu Ning vaguely felt that something was wrong. Being the champion of the Qingjiao competition was not bad, but it didn't seem to be worth the Zhenbao Pavilion's effort. But looking at Yengu, he knew that he wouldn't be able to get anything out of him, so he didn't continue asking. He only hoped to find you, as soon as possible. After Chu Ning left, the smile on Yen Ji's face immediately disappeared, and he quickly ordered his subordinates to take action. Master wasn't in the capital, but Madam was missing. What was going on? If Master came back and found out that he didn't take good care of Madam, wait. Yengu suddenly thought of something and was stunned. Master was gone and Madam was missing. Could it be Yen Ji's heart was on fire, but he didn't dare to leave the capital? Without Master's permission, no one was allowed to go to that place. He wanted to ask Yen Qing and the others, but he was afraid that he would be discovered. After thinking for a long time, he could only pray that Master was with Madam. After a few hours, the sky was bright and Chu Luiyue opened her eyes. She moved and realized that she had unknowingly laid in Rongxiu's arms. His black cloak was still covering her body. Rongxiu? When did you wake up? Chu Luiyue rubbed her eyes and asked. At the same time, she felt embarrassed. She had planned to guard Rongxiu, but she didn't expect that she would fall asleep and didn't even know that he had woken up. With a smile on his lips, Rongxiu easily carried her up. Chu Luiyue exclaimed and hugged his neck instinctively. It seemed that Rongxiu had recovered. I just woke up too, Rongxiu said. Chu Luiyue didn't believe him, but she didn't ask for details. Rongxiu kissed her. We should go back. Chu Luiyue asked uncertainly, have you recovered? After experiencing such a fierce and dangerous fight yesterday, and then suddenly fainted, she was still worried. Rongxiu raised his eyebrows. Whether it's good or not, you'll know when we get married. Of course you have to check now. Although this place isn't very good, it's not impossible. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes and put her arms around his neck. She moved closer and said with a smile, really? Do you still want yesterday? With a soft and warm body in his arms, yesterday's scenes came back to his mind. He tightened his arms slightly, suppressed the restlessness in his heart, and glanced at her warningly. This little thing was as bad as always. Rongxiu felt that he had the potential to be a saint since he could endure to this point. He chuckled and turned the tables. You probably don't know, but Prince Li's mansion has prepared everything for the wedding. We can get married immediately after the marriage proposal. Digression. Lost. Bang. The remaining updates are being filled. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from the Love Network. Chapter 242. Chu Luiyue was speechless. She felt more and more that Rongxiu seemed to have already prepared and was just waiting for her to agree. What if I don't come this time? She asked. Rongxiu glanced at her. If you don't come this time, next time you will come. Chu Luiyue couldn't help but laugh. Your Highness Prince Li is so confident. What if I don't agree? Wouldn't those things be in vain? Oh, that's not right. Your Highness Prince Li can find someone else. Rongxiu's tone was calm. Will only be you. If you don't agree, I'll just burn it. Anyway, it was prepared for her from the beginning. If she didn't want it, then there was no point in it existing. Of course, he never thought about this. He was determined to get her. Chu Luiyue was stunned. He spoke with a calm expression, as if he was talking about something very ordinary. He didn't feel that these words were so shocking. She paused and finally asked, when did you start preparing those things? Did Rongxiu really like her from the first time they met? That ragged and blood-stained girl? Rongxiu narrowed his eyes. A long time ago. A long time ago? How long ago was that? Chu Luiyue wanted to ask more, but Rongxiu had already carried her and stepped into the teleportation array. Countless streams of light instantly formed a barrier around the two of them. Their vision turned dark, and the two of them entered the void of the teleportation array. The two of them quickly returned to the forest. After coming out of the lake, the barrier around the two of them finally dissipated. Chu Luiyue turned around to take a look. It was noon. The dense white mist on the lake seemed to dissipate a little, and the streams of light below the teleportation array seemed to be hidden. From the outside, it was impossible to detect anything unusual. There is a barrier outside the lake. Ordinary people can't get close, so naturally they won't find this teleportation array. Rongxiu seemed to have guessed her thoughts and explained faintly. Chu Luiyue nodded and then he remembered something. So you're saying that you deliberately let me in? Rong Xiao glanced at Xue Xue with a faint smile. Xue Xue raised her neck proudly. What happened? What happened? It did it on purpose. If it wasn't for him taking the initiative, he didn't know when his master would be able to get married. Dumpling looked at Xue Xue with disdain. Sure enough, the master was shameless and the magical beast he raised was the same. Xue Xue bared her teeth at Dumpling. Dumpling swung its tail and faced it with its butt. Chu Luiyue could not help but laugh. For some reason, Dumpling did not seem to be afraid of Xue Xue, and even provoked her from time to time. Logically speaking, Xue Xue was a high-level magical beast, and Dumpling's level was much lower than it. There was a difference in level between the two, so Dumpling did not dare to do this. However, when she thought about how Dumpling ignored the black flying python's orders, she felt relieved. When she had the chance, she had to study Dumpling carefully. All right. There's still the Qingjiao competition today. Chu Luiyue looked at the swaying sunlight in the forest and suddenly remembered that there was a competition today. The competition should have already started at this time. Rong Xiao smiled. You seem to care a lot about the Qingjiao competition. Chu Luiyue nodded honestly. The competition is not important. What's important is the rewards. Although she had already gotten first place in the warrior competition, since she had signed up, it was better to get more rewards. Seeing Chu Luiyue's bright eyes, Rong Xiao started to reflect. It seems that I gave her too few rewards last time? Do you still want to participate in the Qingjiao competition? Chu Luiyue shrugged. I'm afraid I won't be able to make it in time if I go back now. Rong Xiao smiled faintly. If you want to participate, you can still make it in time. Jianghu had been anxiously waiting for Chu Luiyue's news in Zhenbao Pavilion. As he was worried that he would alert the enemy, he did not go out personally. Instead, he secretly sent out many people. However, time passed by bit by bit. It was almost noon, but there was still no movement. His heart was in his mouth. He thought that if he still couldn't find her in the evening, he would have to resort to extreme measures. Just as he was waiting impatiently, he suddenly sensed something and took out a palm-sized compass from his bosom. That compass was used by his master to send messages. In all these years, his master had only used it less than 3 times. He did not expect it to be used now. The purple jade needle on the compass shook a few times before finally pointing in a certain direction. Jianghu did not hesitate and rushed out. Jiangnan Square. The entire square was very quiet. The arena was filled with participating Xian masters. As the Xian master competition required more concentration, everyone consciously kept quiet. However, the atmosphere of the competition was getting more and more tense. Bang! A soft sound was heard. In the arena, 3 stars lit up on the stone platform in front of a Xian master. That meant that he had already solved the first 3 Xian formations. That's Xing Yiming from Nanfeng Academy. He's only 18 years old this year, but he's already a level 4 Xian master. He's considered one of the best among these students. There are less than 10 people in this arena who are stronger than a level 4 Xian master, right? In the end, the first place should be decided among these people. Look, Xuanhuan has also solved 3 formations. The Xian masters from Nanfeng Academy seem to be very powerful. Speaking of which, elder son from Tianlu Academy is also a Xian master. Logically speaking, the Xian masters he nurtured should be very outstanding. Why hasn't anyone from their academy solved the 3rd formation yet? That Si Ting seems to be his student, right? I heard that he's quite powerful, but I don't know how he compares to the others. Hey, isn't Chu Luiyue also a Xian master? She can even activate a level 4 black crystal Xian formation. Why isn't she here today? In the arena, Si Ting held a chess piece and didn't place it down for a long time. He turned his head to look at the empty seat beside him and slightly furrowed his brows. Chu Luiyue isn't here yet. According to her personality, there's no reason for her to not participate in the competition after signing up. Master also seemed to be a little anxious just now. I wonder if it has something to do with Chu Luiyue. He thought for a while, suppressed the uneasiness in his heart, and placed that chess piece down. Bang! The 3rd formation was solved easily. Quick look. Si Ting solved it too. He seems to be a level 4 Xian master too. But his ranking is still quite low. It seems like Nanfeng Academy is going to be first. The crowd discussed softly. Situ Xingqian sat in her seat and seemed to be watching the situation in the arena, but her gaze kept darting to Tianlu Academy's side. Chu Luiyue actually didn't show up today. Cheng Han noticed her gaze and naturally guessed what she was thinking. He sneered. Xingqian, you don't have to look anymore. That Chu Liwei must be scared, so she ran away at the last minute. Mobile users, please browse and read. A better reading experience comes from Love Network. You're tuning in to this Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.